Chapter 973. Luo Fan could feel that the shackles on his cultivation realm, which seemed to be unbreakable, had become much smaller. The unbreakable charm seemed to have lessened as well. This meant that it was much easier for him to break through to the Tao integration realm and become a transcendent expert. Clearly, these were the direct benefits he had obtained after successfully refining the great perfection quasi-saint realm puppet. According to Luo Fan's cultivation system, a great accomplishment sage-to-be puppet was equivalent to a transcendent expert puppet. Even if it was just a puppet and not a real living being or a real cultivator, it still contained many mysteries of the transcendent realm. After successfully refining it, Luo Fan could naturally see through many mysteries of the transcendent realm, bringing him one step closer to the transcendent realm. After a long time, Luo Fan let out a long sigh of relief, and the divine light in his eyes condensed again. The puppet in front of him had also completely retracted its aura. It looked just like an ordinary strong man in armor. No one would have thought that the extremely terrifying aura that made almost all living beings on the planet worship it originated from it. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. 9 figures streaked across the sky at an unimaginable speed and appeared directly in front of Luo Fan. They were the 9 strongest experts of Hidden Armor Sect. It really is Elder Luo. I didn't expect Elder Luo's attainments in the Tao of Puppets to be so shocking. It's only been a mere 9,000 years, but he's actually able to refine such a powerful puppet. It's really admirable. The sect master's eldest senior brother was clearly shocked. He said with a wry smile. The other people also had an inexplicable look of shock on their faces. They looked at Luo Fan with respect and fear in their eyes. It was hard to describe with simple words. They were the elders of the Hidden Armor Sect and had cultivated the Tao of Puppets for hundreds of millions of years. Therefore, no one knew better than them how broad and profound the Tao of Puppets was, and how difficult it was to refine a quasi-sage level puppet. Not to mention 9,000 years. It would be wishful thinking to forge a puppet that could barely reach the level of a great accomplishment quasi-sage in 90 million years, not to mention the huge amount of materials required. It would reach an unimaginable level, enough to completely hollow out the incomparably wealthy Hidden Armor Sect. It was precisely because of this that they were so shocked that Luo Fan was able to create such a terrifying puppet in such a short period of time. They even felt that their countless years of cultivation had been in vain. When Luo Fan heard what Na Suzerain said, he smiled and said, "It's just a small gain. The most important thing is that my sect's inheritance is unparalleled. If I didn't have this foundation, it would be impossible for me to refine a puppet of this level." Although they had been enemies with the Hidden Armor Sect at the start, that had only been a small conflict. One wouldn't slap a smiling person. Since this person was so respectful, he naturally couldn't treat him coldly. When the elders saw Luo Fan's appearance, they all breathed a sigh of relief, and their expressions gradually returned to their original calm. They clearly felt that Luo Fan didn't reject them too much. Eldest senior brother Na Suzerain said, "There is one more thing that I need to trouble Elder Luo with. I wonder if Elder Luo would mind?" With a thought, Luo Fan discovered the current appearance of the planet. He roughly guessed what the other party wanted to say. He only smiled and didn't interrupt the other party's words. He said, "Go ahead." Eldest senior brother Na Suzerain said, "The planet of our sect is now out of orbit. Although it doesn't affect us much, it will gradually make the planet become dead and lose its cultivation environment. I'm afraid that this will affect our sect. I wonder if Elder Luo can use his magical power to move the planet back to its original orbit." Hearing the words of the sect head's eldest senior, the other few elders tactfully bowed to Luo Fan. Their pleading appearance was displayed vividly and vividly. When Luo Fan saw their expressions, it was just as he had expected. What they wanted him to do was to move the planet back. This might have taken a lot of effort and time in the past, but now that he had a great accomplishment quasi-saint puppet, it was a matter of a thought. In fact, it only took an instant for him to do so. This was definitely as easy as lifting a finger. Thus, he only smiled slightly, nodded, and said, I was the one who caused this, so I naturally have to restore it. The planet had now completely left its original star system and was freely drifting in the boundless void of the dream world. This change caused the planet to completely lose the light of the sun. Although the planet still had an incomparably dense yuan qi, because of the loss of the sun, the planets on it also lost their source of life. In the end, they would completely disappear, causing the planet to become dead. In this way, the planet was naturally equivalent to being crippled. One could imagine how great the impact on the Hidden Armor sect would be. If the situation did not change, the Hidden Armor sect could only find another planet with life and move the entire sect away. This would naturally be a great loss to the Hidden Armor sect. It was precisely because of this that the eldest senior brother dared to bite the bullet and ask Luo Fan to move the planet back to its original position. Luo Fan understood how great the change in the planet's position would be for the Hidden Armor sect. Thus, he had guessed what the eldest senior brother wanted to ask. Since he had already agreed, Luo Fan no longer hesitated. His thoughts cut into the puppet he had just refined. In an instant, he seemed to have changed into a different body. An incomparably powerful and profound feeling surged into his heart. The entire universe, the entire world, and even the mysteries of the great Tao seemed to have undergone an earth-shattering change in his eyes. Faintly, he felt that at this moment, he could easily crush thousands of his previous selves. And in this state, what his main body had needed to expend a tremendous amount of energy and time to accomplish was now as simple as flipping his hand. With a slight thought, a mysterious power enveloped the entire planet. As this power wrapped around the planet, the various changes that were occurring on the planet instantly calmed down, as if time had been reversed. The cracked earth closed up once more. The magma, infernal chi, earth fire, and other underground things that had gushed out from the surface of the planet returned to the ground. The terrain that had changed due to the tremors returned to its original position. Even the countless strange flowers and grasses were restored to life, becoming lush and lush, as if there was no difference from before. The many buildings of the Hidden Armor sect were restored to their original state in an instant. Even the many strange beasts that had been living on the surface of the planet were given new life. As if nothing had happened, they continued to live on the surface of the planet in a muddle-headed manner. All of these inconceivable changes naturally couldn't escape the perception of the 9 Hidden Armor sect elders and sect masters. As they sensed these changes, they couldn't help but feel envy and admiration towards this large success quasi-saint level puppet, wishing that this puppet was theirs. Luo Fan did not care about them. With another thought, the mysterious power that enveloped the entire planet fluctuated in a strange manner. Amidst these fluctuations, the entire planet instantly disappeared into the boundless void. The entire space in the void fluctuated like a tidal wave. Even time itself began to vibrate subtly because of this change. Almost at the same time, in the star system where the planet had originally been, in the orbit of the planet, in the position where the planet should have been, an incomparably huge planet appeared out of thin air. The space and time in this position were the same as the place where the planet had disappeared. Inexplicable changes also occurred, and it took a long time for these changes to subside. The appearance of such a huge planet instantly caused many changes to the other planets in the star system. Even the central star of the star system underwent some sort of change. The various flames and heat on the star began to shift. This caused the appearance of the star system to subtly change. Of course, this was only an extremely subtle change, and it did not last for long. After a few minutes, the star system returned to its original state. When all these changes subsided, the star system and the planet seemed as if nothing had happened. The planet that had left the star system and circled around in the void outside seemed to have been an illusion. This caused the many disciples of the Hidden Armor sect to suspect that they had been attacked by an illusion. Some of the disciples that had gathered together looked at each other, feeling a sense of absurdity welling up. After doing all this, Luo Fan only smiled, and his thoughts separated from the puppet. In an instant, his strength rapidly shrank, and the world in his eyes seemed to be shrouded in a thick fog. He could not help but feel a sense of loss, and even a strong desire to always place his thoughts on the puppet emerged. However, his Tao heart was firm, and with a single thought, he completely suppressed this sense of loss and desire. His mind became clear and bright again, and his mood became calm once more. No matter how strong the puppet was, it was just a tool. It was fine to use it to fight against enemies and use it to comprehend its mysteries, but if he really became dependent on it, he would be courting death and destroying his own future. How could he be so unwise to cultivate to his current level? All right, now that everything has returned to normal, there are only a few hundred years left until the Sanctuary qualification battle. Sect Master and Elders, you should make your preparations. After all, Luo Fan was not a true member of the Hidden Armor sect, so it was naturally impossible for him to show much respect to the higher-ups of the Hidden Armor sect. After doing what needed to be done, he directly said these words that an ordinary guest elder would not say to the higher-ups of the sect. When the higher-ups of the Hidden Armor sect heard Luo Fan's words, their expressions turned solemn. They knew that Luo Fan was not in the mood to talk nonsense with them, and they did not dare to say anything else. After expressing their gratitude to Luo Fan, they carefully withdrew and left. Luo Fan watched them leave. With a move of his mind, the puppet raised its hand and waved. Power condensed in the void, directly forming a small world. The door to the small world appeared in front of him. He did not delay, and directly stepped into the small world. He saw that there was a medium-sized land in the small world. The land was lush and verdant, full of all kinds of strange flowers and plants. The entire small world was filled with an incomparably rich vitality, and the Xiantian Yuan Qi was tens of thousands of times richer than in the outside world. Above the small world, there was a floating platform several feet wide, suspended in the void. Luo Fan stepped into the small world and appeared on the floating platform. After Luo Fan appeared, the puppet also appeared, sitting opposite Luo Fan. With a slight thought, Luo Fan closed his eyes, and his mind once again entered the body of the puppet in front of him. In an instant, that incomparably wonderful feeling once again surged into his heart, giving birth to a feeling of intoxication. Luo Fan was very clear that this feeling of intoxication was not a useful feeling. His mind moved slightly. With a thought, he dispersed the intoxicating feeling and sensed the various feelings coming from the puppet with an incomparably clear mind. With a clear mind, Luo Fan felt as if he had already ascended to the transcendent realm and sensed everything with the senses of a transcendent realm expert. He had already sensed his surroundings once before. Even if he were to do it again, it wouldn't make much sense. Moreover, this was the dream world. Moreover, it was a small world that he had created himself. There were still many differences between it and the real universe and the real world. Therefore, in comparison, it was more useful to sense his own body with the help of such senses. Under the senses brought by the puppet, everything inside Luo Fan's body was displayed in his mind in unprecedented detail. It was originally perfect. His powerful body, strength, spirit, perception, mind, and so on seemed to have many small flaws at this moment, and he could vaguely see many areas that could be strengthened. However, when he sensed these flaws and areas that could be strengthened, Luo Fan could not help but be overjoyed. Being able to sense these flaws and areas that could be strengthened did not mean that his body and everything else had become weaker. Instead, it meant that he had found the direction of his next cultivation step, which meant that his senses had become more acute. How could he not be happy? What a pity. After all, a puppet is only a puppet. Although it is a transcendent realm puppet, it is still far from being a true transcendent like me. Even if I make up for the flaws and areas that could be strengthened, there is still a huge gap between me and a true transcendent. After his joy, he felt a wave of dissatisfaction and sighed slightly. However, sighing was just sighing. Luo Fan did not hesitate at all as to what he should do. He slowly closed his eyes, and with the help of the puppet's senses, he continuously adjusted his own power, making up for the flaws in his power, making it purer and more resilient. At the same time, it was getting closer and closer to the source of his power. This process lasted for several decades. Originally, if he had already become a transcendent, making up for the flaws in his power would have been something that could be done with just a thought. It would not have even taken a breath, let alone several decades. However, he was currently only a Tao integration expert. Although he had already reached the end of the Tao integration realm, he was still a Tao integration expert. It was already extremely rare for him to be able to rely on his powerful senses to discover and make up for the flaws. Naturally, he could not make up for them as quickly and easily as a true transcendent could. He could only rely on time to make up for the flaws in his power. When the last bit of flaw in his power was completely made up, Luo Fan suddenly felt his body and mind relax. The shackles that shackled his cultivation realm and prevented him from breaking through seemed to have become a little more fragile, and the unbreakable charm that it exuded seemed to have diminished greatly. Evidently, because the flaws in his power had been made up, the bottleneck that he was currently facing had weakened a little. When he sensed this, Luo Fan was overjoyed. This kind of harvest was an unexpected gain. It was something that he had not expected. However, he soon understood the principle behind it. The method he cultivated was the inherited method of the vigorous Tao master. It was so exquisite that it could even allow a practitioner to continue cultivating after becoming a Tao master. Naturally, it was a sufficiently exquisite method. Such an exquisite method clearly had the effect of proving one's Tao through strength. In other words, it was a cultivation method that relied on strength that far exceeded one's own cultivation level to forcefully break through the bottleneck that shackled one's cultivation level, thereby allowing one's own cultivation level to break through. At this time, the flaws in his power had been made up. Naturally, his power level was closer to the power of the transcendent realm. Naturally, he could exert some of the power of proving one's Tao through strength. Although his power had not completely reached the requirements of proving one's Tao through strength and could not completely break through the bottleneck, it was enough to weaken the bottleneck and allow him to feel his progress. Feeling such progress, Luo Fan could not bear it any longer. He also made use of the puppet's senses to make up for the flaws in other aspects of his body so that he could feel other aspects of his body that could be improved. It took Luo Fan dozens of years to improve his power. Then it was perception, divine soul, body, mind, on many other aspects. By the time everything was done, several hundred years had passed. In total, it had been nearly 10,000 years since he stepped into this dream world. However, it was almost time for the Sanctum qualification battle to begin. Chapter 974. In these hundreds of years, because he had fixed all kinds of flaws, after strengthening all kinds of factors that could be strengthened, even though his cultivation realm was still shackled by the bottleneck of the realm, his own strength had increased by hundreds of times. Moreover, even the bottleneck that shackled him had become much weaker than before because of such a change. The feeling of being indestructible and indestructible was already faintly discernible, and it was a world of difference compared to before. Such a harvest had definitely exceeded Luo Fan's imagination. His gaze towards the puppet changed slightly, as if he was looking at an incomparably precious treasure. After adjusting his breathing for a few more days, he once again tempered the strength he had grasped. When he felt that all of his strength, all of his divine abilities, and all of his power were under his perfect control, the entire dream world suddenly underwent some indescribable change. This change could not be described with words. Even when Luo Fan used his super eyesight to observe the laws, and even the great Tao of the dream world, he could not find anything different. But at this moment, he clearly knew that the entire dream world had undergone some kind of change, some kind of incomparably subtle and mysterious change. Looks like the battle is about to begin. Such a thought flashed through Luo Fan's mind. With a thought, the puppet trembled slightly, turning into a ray of mysterious light that shot into his sea of consciousness. Then he stood up and took a light step out of the miniature world created by the puppet, directly arriving at the heaven-hidden palace of the Hidden Armor sect. After he left, the small world shook violently and collapsed into nothingness, as if it had never existed in the first place. When Luo Fan appeared in the heaven-hidden palace, the 9 higher-ups of the Hidden Armor sect were already waiting there. Seeing Luo Fan arrive, the 9 people all breathed a sigh of relief. Evidently, they were still a little worried that Luo Fan would go back on his words and disregard his promise to not represent their Hidden Armor sect in the Sacred Region qualification battle. Luo Fan looked at the 9 of them and nodded inwardly. These 9 people still had the hearts of innocent children. Compared to before, their cultivation realm had also increased by quite a bit. Even eldest brother Na Suzerain, who was already at the peak of the intermediate stage of Sage to Be, had also improved by several times. Although he did not break through the intermediate stage of Sage to Be to the advanced stage of Sage to Be, he was one step closer to the true peak of the intermediate stage of Sage to Be. Even the sect master, who had already reached the pinnacle, was in such a state. Naturally, the others had improved even more. Among them, the 2 people whom the sect master had high hopes for previously had both made breakthroughs and reached the peak of intermediate stage of quasi-sage realm. As for the rest, even those who hadn't broken through a small realm had reached the peak of their realm. Based on the strength of the 9 of them, they could already be ranked in the top 100 of all the sects in the entire Dreamland world. Although, without Luo Fan's help, it would be difficult for them to win the battle and obtain the qualification to enter the Saint region due to their lack of foundation. Nevertheless, they had already made a huge improvement in their ranking, which was many times better than before. How will the battle be held? Luo Fan did not stand on ceremony. After appearing, he directly asked a few of them. Na Suzerain said, "The battle is different, but generally speaking, it depends on the overall strength of each sect. Therefore, it is divided into individual battles and group battles. Only sects that rank in the top 1,000 can be considered qualified. Of course, the higher the ranking, the better the territory in the Saint region. If you rank in the top 10, you might even have the opportunity to meet a sage." Initially, the sect master was very rational, but towards the end, he had a longing look on his face. Obviously, he was extremely envious of the treatment of the top 10. Listening to his explanation, Luo Fan nodded to show that he understood. However, he didn't say much, nor did he show any unusual expression. Meeting a sage sounded wonderful, but to Luo Fan, it wasn't attractive at all. If it was in the real universe, meeting a sage would be a shocking opportunity. As long as he could see a sage with his own eyes, the mysteries of the sage's body would naturally condense a sage's mark in the depths of his spirit. If he could find a way, it would bring him endless benefits. However, in this dreamland world, meeting a sage wasn't an opportunity at all. It could only be a kind of misfortune. The advanced stage of quasi-sage who created this dreamland world was only in the advanced stage of quasi-sage realm. There was an unknown distance between him and the sage realm. Even the difference between heaven and earth would be overestimating his realm. Under such circumstances, how could he know what a sage looked like? How could he know what kind of magical powers a sage had, and what kind of mysteries they had? If he didn't know much about a sage, and didn't know that meeting a sage would naturally condense a sage's mark in his spirit, then it wouldn't be a big deal. However, if he knew about this, then it would be even more troublesome. The reason for this was very simple. If he knew this, then the saint he imagined would naturally have the same power. Naturally, after meeting a person, a sage would condense a mark in the depths of his spirit. And this mark, even if it was an advanced stage of quasi-sage, could not be a real sage's mark. It could only be a mark in his imagination that was extremely different from a real sage's mark and was filled with endless fallacies. Such a mark had the characteristics of a sage's mark in this dreamland world. Like a tarsal bone, it would constantly affect the cultivator and obstruct the cultivator's path. Wasn't this situation extremely troublesome? It was precisely because he knew about this that Luo Fan was so calm and indifferent. If that's the case, then let's fight for the 11th place, Luo Fan said calmly. His words contained confidence and arrogance, causing the 9 people from the Hidden Armor sect to raise their eyebrows. The Hidden Armor sect had a peak intermediate stage of quasi-sage and 8 other intermediate stage quasi-sages. Originally, they were only ranked in the top 10,000 of the entire universe, and at the very bottom of the top 10,000. From this, one could see how powerful the sects at the top of the rankings were. Although Luo Fan was many times stronger than them, and even had an advanced stage of quasi-sage puppet, at most, he could only make the Hidden Armor sect enter the top 5 or 600. In the eyes of the top 10 sects, he was nothing more than an ant. Under such circumstances, how could they not feel that Luo Fan was too arrogant for Luo Fan to say such big words? In the secular world, they might even say that he was too arrogant. However, these 9 people were no fools. In this place, Luo Fan had the power to crush them. No matter how disdainful they were, they couldn't say it out loud and cause trouble for themselves. Therefore, they didn't even discuss their opinions and directly said that this was how it should be and that it was Elder Luo who had thought things through. Only the heavens knew that Luo Fan didn't give them any explanation at all. Naturally, Luo Fan didn't care what they were thinking. He just smiled and said no more. At this moment, a mysterious light condensed out of thin air. As if it didn't pass through any time or space, it directly appeared in front of eldest senior brother Na Suzerain. The mysterious light appeared in an unusual and mysterious way. Luo Fan couldn't help but narrow his eyes. He carefully sensed the place where the mysterious light appeared, trying to find out how it appeared and what kind of power or magic was behind it. At this time, Luo Fan was already at the end of the Tao integration realm. His realm was also consolidated to the limit. Compared to the 9 experts of the Hidden Armor sect, his perceptive ability was tens of thousands of times stronger. Although the mysterious light appeared in an unusual and mysterious way, he still vaguely sensed some traces. Following these traces, he vaguely sensed an extremely powerful and mysterious aura. The location of the aura was extremely obscure, and it even felt like it was in a place that didn't exist. This feeling made him unable to find any way to get to that place. Even Luo Fan couldn't reach a place that didn't exist. The moment he sensed the aura, he vaguely felt a gaze following his senses. In an instant, he felt like everything about him was completely seen through. This feeling shocked him. His mind trembled, and he completely cut off his perception. As he cut off his perception, the feeling of being watched disappeared without a trace. That must be the saint of this dream realm. Luo Fan sighed. He suddenly felt that the saint might not be as unbearable as he had imagined. However, although he was extremely shocked by the saint's magic power, he didn't regret his probing just now. Even when he felt like everything about him had been seen through, it didn't change. That was because this was necessary. Being completely seen through by the saint might seem like a great setback, but it was unavoidable. There were saints in the sanctuary, so entering the sanctuary was equivalent to entering the territory of the saint. Moreover, it was impossible not to attract the attention of the saint if he entered as a victor in the battle. Even though this was the dream realm of the great accomplishment sage-to-be, and the saint was not a real saint, since the great accomplishment sage-to-be had dared to mold him into a saint, the power of his magic power went without saying. Seeing through a Tao integration cultivator was obviously something that could be done with just a thought. Therefore, it could be said that if he wanted to step into the sanctuary, he would have to go through what he had just encountered. In that case, what was the difference between being late and arriving early? Of course, he didn't have to regret his probing. At this moment, eldest senior brother Na Suzerain had already received the mysterious light. The mysterious light didn't have a physical body. It was just a ball of light. After being received, it vibrated slightly and transmitted some kind of thought to everyone present. This year's Sanctuary Qualification Battle will begin in 3 days. Those sects that are interested in participating in this battle bring 3,000 disciples and enter the gate at dawn 3 days later. No delays will be allowed. After the transmission was completed, it shrank abruptly and turned into a pitch-black singularity in the Grandmaster's hand. This singularity was extremely mysterious. Even though it was formed from condensed light, It was as though it was a real object as it laid quietly in the Grand Master's hand. Na Suzerain sighed and carefully enshrined this singularity on a jade platform that had appeared out of thin air. Then, he placed the jade platform in the depths of the main hall of the Qiantian Hall. Then, he turned around and issued many orders. The entire hidden armor sect started to come alive. Although the 9 of them had spent almost all their energy on self-cultivation over the past 10,000 years, they still made many arrangements during their free time based on past experience. The entire sect had also made a lot of preparations for this qualification battle. At this time, when he issued the orders, it didn't cause too much chaos. The entire hidden armor sect was like a slowly starting war machine that began to erupt with a powerful combat strength. All the resources of the sect were gathered in an extremely short period of time, and over 2,900 of the strongest disciples were selected. They began to spread the news and gradually gathered at the entrance of the Qiantian Hall according to the rules that had been set in place for the past 10,000 years. Although they had already made countless preparations, this was still a major event for the entire sect. Thus, by the time everything was done and all 3,000 disciples had gathered, it was already the time set by the thought. The moment the time arrived, the singularity that was enshrined by eldest senior brother, Na Suzerain, trembled slightly and directly flew above the 3,000 disciples, embedding itself into the void. Then the void distorted and a dazzling golden door thousands of feet tall appeared in the void. The door's aura was extremely shocking. When it appeared in the void, it naturally emitted a powerful aura that caused the entire planet to tremble slightly, as if it couldn't withstand the arrival of the door. The 2 panels of the door slowly opened to the sides. Behind them was a boundless blood-red color. Within that boundless blood-red color, there was an extremely strange aura. It was an incomparably noble aura, but also an aura of hope. It was as if one would be closer to the great Tao as long as they stepped through the door. They would be closer to immortality and not be affected by myriad tribulations. Eldest senior brother Na Suzerain sighed and said to the 2,000 disciples below, "Disciples, this opportunity concerns the future of our sect for generations to come. I hope that all of you will work together." Among these 2,000 disciples, there were dozens of lesser mastery quasi-sages, hundreds of initial mastery quasi-sages, and the rest were all Grand Luo Qiantian realm cultivators. Before entering the Transcendence path, Luo Fan wouldn't have had absolute confidence in defeating any one of these experts. However, at this very moment, they were just a bunch of ants to Luo Fan. With a single thought, he could crush all of them to death. At this moment, their faces were filled with excitement when they heard the sect master's words. Each of them opened their mouths and roared, "We are willing to sacrifice everything for our sect, even if it means death. All right, let's go." Na Suzerain's face was filled with excitement. With a roar, he took the lead and charged into the door that was hundreds of feet tall. At a time like this, Luo Fan naturally didn't have the mood to spoil the mood of these people. He didn't show any unconventional behavior. He flew up with the other 8 elders and followed behind Na Suzerain as they stepped through the door. The other 2,000 or so disciples stepped into the door one after another according to their strength. As soon as he stepped through the door, Luo Fan felt like time and space were shifting. The surrounding time and space were changing madly, and after an unknown period of time, his eyes lit up. He'd already appeared in a completely new world, a completely new world. The sect master hovered blankly in the air before him, staring at the wondrous world in front of him. He was at a loss, and there was some surprise on his face. The other elders beside him had the same expression as well. The disciples who had appeared behind him were buzzing. They were clearly shocked by the scene in front of them and were discussing it softly among themselves. Although these disciples were powerful, they had been disciples for far too long, so they behaved no differently from regular sect disciples. However, they didn't suppress their emotions. Naturally, they would discuss the shocking and strange things they encountered. "What's going on? Isn't this supposed to be a battle? Why is this world so empty? There aren't any other living beings at all. How are we going to fight? Who are we going to fight with? These words came from behind Luo Fan. It was a minor success quasi-sage asking his companion. Although his voice was extremely soft, and he had used telepathic thoughts to transmit his voice, with Luo Fan's remarkable ability, how could such a sound transmission escape his perception? He naturally heard it loud and clear. The world before them was a huge world. It was incredibly vast, but it was flat. There was no land, no oceans, no mountains, no rivers, and no living beings. The only people in the world were the 3,000 people from the Hidden Armor sect. Apart from them, it was an incredibly flat surface. How is this a battlefield? They couldn't help but feel surprised. After a while, Suzerain coughed gently. Just as he was about to say something, the world suddenly shook violently. Then, a thought appeared out of nowhere and spread into the minds of everyone present. There are a total of 137,518 sects participating in this battle. You fulfilled the requirements. Now, the preliminaries for the battle will begin. Every sect must take control of the world they're in within a year. If they can't refine the world core within a year, they'll lose the right to enter the official battlefield. The will was gentle, clear, and powerful. Every living being who sensed it could clearly tell how powerful and terrifying the owner of the will was. Chapter 975. A boundless ocean and a boundless continent appeared on the flat surface of the world. There were countless mountains, plains, rivers, lakes, and all sorts of strange terrains on the continent. It was as if all the terrains in the world had been compressed and placed on this continent. On the boundless sea of martial skills, islands appeared one after another. They were all different, and each of them had their own unique characteristics. After that, boundless vitality appeared out of nowhere. All sorts of vegetation and flowers covered the entire vast thousand domains. Countless powerful auras appeared out of nowhere in this world. In the blink of an eye, the entire vast thousand domains changed from flat and barren world to one that was full of vitality and danger. Among the powerful auras, there was no lack of powerful auras at the intermediate stage of the quasi-sage realm. There were even some auras that were at the advanced stage of the quasi-sage realm. An indescribably sinister feeling suddenly rushed towards the people from the Hidden Armor sect, making them feel as if the peaceful and happy life they had enjoyed in the past had suddenly faded away. They could imagine just how great of a challenge this would be for them. Eldest senior brother, Suzerain, heaved a sigh of relief. Although the changes in the vast thousand domains were beyond their imagination and contained unfathomable mysteries, it was many times better than the flat surface of the world. At the very least, they knew what to do in order to continue. And most importantly, they had an expert like Luo Fan to help them. The strongest expert in this world was only at the advanced stage of the quasi-sage realm. Elder Luo Fan, who had joined their sect 10,000 years ago, could easily subdue them. Naturally, they did not have to worry about not being able to control this world. During the changes in the vast thousand domains, Luo Fan had already summoned the advanced stage of the quasi-sage realm puppet. Given his own cultivation and strength, this vast thousand domains would not pose any threat to him. Summoning the advanced stage of the quasi-sage realm puppet seemed to be making a mountain out of a molehill. However, he didn't refine this puppet for the sake of collecting it. He had to find a better and more convenient way to get through the preliminaries. Of course, he would not force himself not to use it. After the advanced stage of the quasi-sage realm puppet appeared, Luo Fan inserted his thoughts into it, and his perception instantly increased by many times. In an instant, everything in the vast thousand domains was absorbed into his mind and mind. In an instant, the laws of the great thousand world were no longer a secret to him. At the same time, he had found a way to refine the world core of the vast thousand domains. Unfortunately, this method required the cooperation of many people. Furthermore, it required different cultivators from different directions to work together. Otherwise, he would have directly refined the world core. After all, this was only the preliminaries, and he did not want to waste too much time here. Luo Fan didn't have too many feelings for the people from the Hidden Armor sect, nor did he have any thoughts of letting them temper themselves. After understanding how to refine the world core, he did not hide anything and said, Sect Master, I have already found a way to refine the world core. As long as we divide the disciples into 9 teams and attack from these 9 positions, we will be able to refine the world core. Finally, at the same time, the node of the law of the world would be broken, and the world core would appear. Once you imprint your mark into it, you will be able to control this great thousand world. As he spoke, Luo Fan casually pointed, and a map of the great thousand world appeared in front of everyone. On that map, there were 9 red dots. These 9 red dots were not only on the continent. 3 of them were in the boundless ocean, and their distribution was extremely vast. These 9 positions. Eldest senior brother, Na Suzerain, looked at the 9 positions and sensed the entire vast 1,000 domains at the same time. He couldn't help but exclaim. As a powerful existence at the pinnacle of the quasi-sage intermediate realm, a great thousand world wasn't considered big to him. He only needed to slightly release his perception, and he would be able to sense everything in the great thousand world. Thus, when he looked at the 9 locations on the map, he only needed to sweep his gaze over them, and he could clearly see the locations in the great thousand world. The reason why he exclaimed was because he could clearly see the appearance of the 9 positions. There was nothing special about these 9 positions. However, each of them had an extremely powerful aura that had reached the level of a great accomplishment quasi-sage. The positions of the auras clearly overlapped with the 9 positions that Luo Fan had pointed out. There was no difference at all. In order to break the nodes of the laws of the 9 positions, one would naturally have to completely defeat the owners of the 9 auras. He couldn't help but be shocked and cry out in surprise. That was a great perfection quasi-sage. Even though they were beasts and were much weaker than real cultivators, they were still existences at the great perfection quasi-sage realm. Even if the entire sect joined forces, they might not be able to defeat such existences. Now, they had to split their forces into 9 positions and defeat them at the same time. The difficulty was so great that the sect master felt despair. He couldn't help but exclaim in shock. When Luo Fan saw the sect master exclaim in shock, he smiled and said, Sect master, don't worry. Even though the 9 auras are powerful, they're only beasts and don't have much intelligence. With the strength of our sect, it's not difficult to defeat them. After exclaiming in shock, Na Suzerain felt a little regretful. The preliminaries of this battle would eliminate most of the sects, so it was obviously not going to be easy. Moreover, they had prepared for this battle for such a long time, so no matter how difficult it was, they could only grit their teeth and go through with it. It was impossible for them to just turn around and leave without doing anything. Under such circumstances, what was the point of exclaiming like this? Apart from affecting the morale of the army, there was no other effect. After hearing Luo Fan's words, he forced himself to be spirited and said, That's right. I was thinking too much just now. Thank you for your advice, Elder Luo. These beasts have low intelligence and don't know cultivators. No matter how powerful they are, they can't unleash much power. As long as we are a little more careful, we will definitely be able to kill them. His words were not imbued with any power, nor were they too loud, but everyone could hear them. His words also made the expressions of the disciples of the Hidden Armor sect, who had slightly changed after hearing Luo Fan's words, relax a lot. Clearly, their trust in this sect master was stronger than their trust in themselves. Even if this sect master did not say anything too impassioned, it was enough to dispel many of their worries. Luo Fan smiled slightly and did not say much. He didn't even think about how to divide the disciples. He believed that this sect master would definitely do a good job, so there was no need for him to talk nonsense. As expected, after Na Suzerain finished speaking, everyone's expressions became relaxed again. The expressions of everyone relaxed once more when they saw this, and then they started to divide the 3,000 disciples into 9 groups with different numbers of people. The 9 martial brothers would lead them, and they would each be in charge of a location. As for Luo Fan, after asking some questions, he asked Luo Fan to sit in the center and wait for the world core to appear so that he could leave a mark as soon as possible. He wanted to pass the preliminaries in the shortest time possible. This was Luo Fan's original intention, so there was nothing much to say. He just nodded, turned around, and disappeared into the void. It was as if he had never appeared before. Even with Na Suzerain's powerful abilities, he still couldn't find a trace of his existence. He couldn't help but admire Luo Fan even more. After that, the 9 elders and sect master each led their group of disciples and dispersed, heading towards the 9 locations pointed out by Luo Fan. The number of people in these 9 groups was based on their strength. The weaker the elder, the more people they would be assigned, and the stronger the elder, the fewer people they would be assigned. Therefore, it was the sect leader who got the least number of people. He only got 120 people. For some unknown reason, although the living beings in the Great Thousand Domains were incomparably powerful, they didn't have much intelligence and were extremely irritable. It wasn't a smooth journey to reach the 9 locations. Along the way, they had to pass through the territories of many strange beasts, and there were also countless challenges and dangers. The members of these 9 groups had practically fought a bloody battle the entire way. There was no exception at all. Although there were only a dozen or so strange beasts of the great perfection sage to be in the vast thousand domains, there were many other strange beasts of the medium perfection sage to be and small perfection sage to be. Along the way, every team led by an elder was intercepted by dozens of medium perfection sage to be. Since it was a bloody battle, it was naturally impossible for everything to be smooth sailing. In every team, there would be disciples who died in battle due to lack of battle experience, bad luck, or lack of strength. Their countless years of cultivation would turn into bubbles, their bodies and Tao vanishing, and their souls dispersing. By the time the various groups reached their destination, there were only 2,500 disciples left from the original 3,000. They had lost more than 400 disciples. It must be known that every single one of these disciples was at least an innate zenith heaven realm existence. In the age of chaos, every single one of them could be considered an expert and could be said to be an existence that controlled a large part of the universe. But now, in this great thousand domains, they had lost more than 400 disciples just because of this journey. Even though the upper echelons of the Hidden Armor sect had long anticipated this loss, they still felt their hearts ache and their faces were extremely unsightly. There are so many losses just on the journey. Are all the disciples going to be sacrificed in the real battle? Such a thought appeared in everyone's mind, and it made them have a deeper understanding of the cruelty of the sanctuary qualification battle this time. The 9 great perfection quasi-saint beasts were the strongest existences in the great thousand worlds. Naturally, there would be countless weaker beasts attached to them. Therefore, none of the beasts were left to be harvested by them. If they wanted to fight with the 9 great perfection quasi-saint beasts, they would have to break through many obstacles and defeat many powerful beasts before they could reach their destination. Because of their previous experience, the members of the Hidden Armor sect were no longer as immature as they were at the beginning. Their combat methods were no longer the same as before. Therefore, although the enemies they encountered were much stronger than the ones they encountered on the way to the Great Perfection Quasi-Sage Realm, their losses were much smaller compared to the ones they encountered on the way to the Great Perfection Quasi-Sage Realm. In total, the 9 teams had only lost 100 or so disciples. That was still a lot. However, it was still a huge improvement compared to before. Although the 9 elders and the sect master still felt heartache, they did not dare to give up. Nevertheless, they felt much better and gratified. Through the Hidden Armor sect's special means of communication, every team member contacted each other. Once they agreed on a time, they would move together, forming 9 battle formations. The strength of all the survivors would be condensed, and the strength of all the people scattered throughout the boundless universe would be gathered together in a mysterious way. At the same time, they attacked the 9 great perfection quasi-sage realm beasts. The 9 beasts were existences at the great perfection quasi-sage realm. In other words, they were existences in the transcendent realm. Because they were beasts, their spiritual intelligence was much lower than that of real cultivators. Moreover, they did not have any cultivation inheritance, and their use of strength was extremely crude. However, they were not real beasts. Their spiritual intelligence was not comparable to that of cultivators in the same realm, but it was not much worse than that of ordinary people. However, they were not at the mercy of others. This battle caused landslides and tsunamis, the void to shake, and time to fluctuate. The entire Great Thousand Worlds seemed to be on the verge of being destroyed because of this terrifying battle. The Hidden Armor sect's method of forming formations across space was extremely exquisite. All the strength was condensed into one. The might produced was astonishing, and it was a level stronger than the strongest among them. Although it could not last for long, it was enough to pose a serious threat to these great perfection quasi-sage realm beasts. Moreover, more importantly, the Hidden Armor sect was a cultivation sect with a very long history. Their various mysterious attacks were not something that the beasts could compare to. Thus, in the course of the battle, the Hidden Armor sect gradually gained the upper hand, gradually suppressing the 9 great perfection quasi-sage realm beasts. In the end, the 9 beasts let out doomsday-like roars. Finally, they unwillingly exploded with the intent to perish together with the enemy. After causing great losses to the Hidden Armor sect, they perished. At the end of the battle, the Hidden Armor sect had originally entered the Great Thousand Worlds with 3,000 people. They had lost more than half of their original number. Among these disciples, there were only slightly more than 500 who fought against the other beasts. However, in the battle against the 9 great perfection quasi-sage realm beasts, they lost close to 1,500 disciples. Such a loss made eldest senior brother Nasuzuran's eyes turn red with heartache. After all, even the weakest Khanate golden immortal realm disciple was nurtured by the sect through the consumption of countless resources and energy. Yet now they'd actually lost so many in just a single preliminary. How could he not feel heartache from this? The sect master's eldest senior brother's eyes were completely red as he gazed at the remaining disciples who were in extremely sorry states and exhausted to the point of death. He forcefully suppressed the pain in his heart and tried his best to encourage them before he started a search for the law nodes. Those nodes were not difficult to find. It was unknown where they were hidden on the bodies of the 9 great perfection quasi-sage realm beasts. After they died, they directly revealed themselves and shone brightly in the void. As long as one searched for them, they could be easily found. It's these nodes. As long as we break them, the world core will appear. Luo Fan did not interfere during the battle of the Hidden Armor sect. Instead, he remained hidden in the void. Only after everything was over did he speak to everyone from the Hidden Armor sect. The Hidden Armor sect leader was slightly dissatisfied with Luo Fan not helping them deal with the great perfection quasi-sage realm beasts. However, he could not show it. It was not only because Luo Fan was stronger than any of them, but also because he understood that Luo Fan had no obligation to help them. Their Hidden Armor sect wanted to participate in the Sanctum qualification battle of their own accord. It was not forced by the other party. Therefore, in this battle, it was out of kindness for Luo Fan to help them, but it was also reasonable for him not to help them. Therefore, after the Hidden Armor sect leader heard Luo Fan's words, he nodded his head stiffly and contacted his junior brothers and sisters. After deciding on a time to act, they all acted at the same time. Using their own abilities, they frantically poured energy into the dazzling nodes of laws. The nodes of laws were where the laws and laws combined. They were not something that could store or absorb energy. They simply could not withstand too much energy. After an almost infinite amount of power was poured into them, the nodes collapsed without a sound. When the 9 nodes collapsed at the same time, the entire Great Thousand World violently trembled. Shortly after, 9 different lights exploded from the 9 nodes and spread out in all directions. In the end, they came into contact with each other, causing violent tremors that caused the entire Great Thousand World to tremble even more intensely. In the end, the tremors intertwined and stacked together, shattering the void where Luo Fan was hiding. An irregular crystal that seemed to contain endless mysteries and seemed to encompass everything in the universe appeared where the void was shattered. This crystal was the world core of the Great Thousand World. Chapter 976. That sect also had great accomplishments sage to be, and even the weakest disciple was more powerful than the Hidden Armor sect. The power of their formation combined had reached an unimaginable level. Normally, a single great accomplishment sage to be would not be able to match up to such a formation. In other words, under normal circumstances, even if Luo Fan's puppet was already at the great accomplishment quasi-saint realm, it would still be easily crushed into powder before the battle formation of the opposing sect. In the end, it would die and its soul would scatter. However, it was clear that Luo Fan was not an ordinary great accomplishment sage to be. His puppet was not an ordinary great accomplishment sage to be either. When his puppet was being refined, he had added the mysteries of the era flow that he had comprehended into it. The mysteries of the era flow were what Luo Fan had relied on to defeat a great accomplishment sage to be at the peak of the Tao integration realm. One could imagine how powerful it was. The power that the puppet at the great perfection quasi-sage realm could display was naturally several times stronger than the power that Luo Fan could display when he was at the end of the Tao integration realm. Although it was impossible for him to defeat a great accomplishment sage to be, he would have to be at least at the small accomplishment or great accomplishment sage to be able to match him. It was clear that although the opposing sect had a great accomplishment sage to be, it was only an ordinary great accomplishment sage to be. There was not even a small accomplishment sage to be. Even if the power of thousands of disciples of the entire sect were combined, the power would only be able to reach the small accomplishment sage to be at most. Moreover, because it was condensed from a formation, its power was still very different from that of a small accomplishment sage to be. There were many flaws that should not exist. In this way, Luo Fan's puppet naturally had no ability to resist at all. It was precisely because of this that the current situation had occurred. With a casual grab from Luo Fan's puppet, the entire formation of the opposing sect had been compressed into a small ball. They were like fish on a chopping board, waiting to be plucked. Holding the small ball, Luo Fan's puppet returned to Luo Fan's side in a flash and handed the small ball to Luo Fan. Luo Fan received the small ball from the puppet with a faint smile on his face. The interior of the small ball was not solid. Instead, it was filled with endless mysterious light. In the mysterious light, thousands of living beings who were at least at the early stage of the sage-to-be realm were frantically gathering their strength to break the shackles of the sphere. However, no matter what they did, they could not shake the sphere at all, as if it had no power at all. Luo Fan sighed and casually pinched it. The sphere was instantly compressed, and the thousands of living beings within the sphere were instantly suppressed by an indescribable force. In the end, even the great perfection quasi-sage exploded and turned into dust. The dust mixed with the dust of his disciples and smeared the space within the sphere evenly. With this change, the ball also collapsed and disappeared, as if it had never appeared. At this moment, the platform of the opposing sect shook slightly and turned into a mysterious light that rushed towards the platform of the Hidden Armor sect. Finally, it completely merged into the platform, causing the size of the Hidden Armor sect's platform to remain the same. However, the aura it exuded was more stable than before. Moreover, the entire platform emitted a magnificent light. From afar, the quality of the platform seemed to have improved. When a mysterious light appeared, Luo Fan suddenly stepped forward. Then, the puppet appeared and compressed the mysterious light into a ball. The ball returned to Luo Fan's hand and was compressed into nothingness. The entire process was seen by the people of the Hidden Armor sect, and for a time, they were all shocked. The formation that had already been set up froze in an instant. Then, the huge golden-armored deity swayed slightly and dispersed into over 1,000 streaks of light. All of them were pulled by the platform below and landed on it. Then, Luo Fan also felt a mysterious pulling force. He knew what this pulling force was, so he did not resist. allowing it to pull him onto the platform and land in front of the people of the Hidden Armor sect. At this moment, the people of the Hidden Armor sect looked at Luo Fan with undisguised awe. Luo Fan's strength was something they could not directly feel before. But at this moment, after Luo Fan easily crushed the strength that was enough to annihilate them, they no longer had any doubts about Luo Fan's strength. The traces of doubt that originally existed in their hearts had completely disappeared, and what was left was, of course, only admiration and fear. In fact, in the heart of eldest senior brother Na Suzerain, Luo Fan's wild words of making the Hidden Armor sect rank 11th in this competition were no longer just wild words, but seemed to have a chance of being realized. There are a total of 10,038 sections. After the first round of elimination, there will be 5,019 sects left. After the second round, there will be 2,510 sects left. After the third round, there will be 1,255 sects left. After the fourth round, there will be only 628 sects left. In other words, as long as you win 4 rounds, you will definitely step into the top 1,000 and obtain the qualifications to enter the Saint region. The remaining 300 or so sects will obviously be chosen from the losers. So even if you win 3 rounds, you still have a chance to obtain the qualifications. No matter what, this eldest senior brother was in existence at the peak of the intermediate sage to be, and his thinking ability was not comparable to that of an ordinary cultivator. In an instant, he had clearly thought through the entire process of the elimination battles. In this way, after the 5th round of battles, there will be 314 sects left. After 6 rounds, there will be 157 sects left. After 6 rounds, there will be 79 sects left. After 7 rounds, there will be 48, 20, and 9 rounds, and that will be the top 10. In other words, if our Hidden Armor sect wants to become the 11th, we only need to win 8 times to achieve our goal, and if we want to enter the top 10, we only need to win 9 times. With Elder Luo's remarkable ability, it doesn't seem that difficult. This eldest senior brother thought to himself, and unknowingly, a kind of longing and inexplicable excitement appeared in his eyes. Luo Fan's gaze was astonishing, and if one were to observe him, they would definitely be able to see through his thoughts. However, Luo Fan was not in the mood to pay attention to his thoughts, as he was currently sensing the changes in his surroundings. After all the disciples of the Hidden Armor sect landed on the platform, an inexplicable change occurred on the platform. An inexplicable heavenly light enveloped the entire platform, and the surrounding space and time changed. In the blink of an eye, they had left that world and appeared in the void where they had stayed for several months. In this void, there were already several hundred platforms. Obviously, although Luo Fan's speed was quite astonishing, there were still hundreds of sects that had finished their battles and eliminated their opponent's sects before him. As for whether the eliminated sects were completely wiped out like Luo Fan, or merely defeated, this was something that Luo Fan could not see. The changes that occurred in the Hidden Armor sect naturally aroused the attention of the other sections. For a time, there was a constant flow of perception from all over, sweeping over the platform where the Hidden Armor sect was located. This was also reasonable. Sects that could defeat their opponents in such a manner were definitely extremely powerful sections. And in this sort of battle where the opponents were randomly assigned, any sect could become their opponent. Thus, these sects that believed themselves to be extremely powerful naturally needed to pay attention to those that could pose a threat to them. And the Hidden Armor sect clearly met their definition of a threat, so they would naturally take this opportunity to observe the situation of the Hidden Armor sect. The current situation of the Hidden Armor sect was quite special. Their overall strength was not very strong, and let alone these several hundred sects, they were much weaker than their previous opponents. If such a situation was discovered by the other sects, they would definitely raise their vigilance towards the Hidden Armor sect and also raise their vigilance towards Luo Fan. Although this wouldn't determine the outcome of the battle, it would definitely cause a great deal of trouble. Thus, with a thought from Luo Fan, a treasure light enveloped the entire platform, completely isolating them from the probing senses. This caused the hidden armor sect to appear in a state of confusion in the eyes of the other sects, making it impossible for them to sense the situation of the hidden armor sect. Towards such a change, those probing senses only felt a slight regret, but they weren't too surprised. They were able to defeat their opponents in such a manner because of their absolute strength. This sect that had appeared was able to defeat their opponents a little slower than them, so it was clear that their strength wasn't too weak. To have such a method to block their probing senses, what was there to be surprised about? The hidden armor sect's eldest senior apprentice brother sensed this change and breathed a sigh of relief. Although it was impossible to attack each other in the void, and if a battle were to occur, it would definitely be a battle to the death. But if the opponent knew the situation of his sect in advance, then perhaps they would come up with corresponding methods to deal with his sect in advance. Even if he had absolute confidence in Luo Fan's strength, he didn't think that Luo Fan would be invincible forever. If he was targeted by an entire sect, he didn't believe that Luo Fan could continue to win. At this time, Luo Fan had concealed all probing senses, causing his worries to completely disappear. He naturally breathed a sigh of relief. Luo Fan didn't care about anything else and carefully observed the other sections. Most sects were like him, concealing the platforms where their sects were located so that Luo Fan couldn't see what the inside of their sects looked like. But among them, there were a few sects that brazenly displayed the strength of their sects without any scruples. Powerful auras soared into the sky, surging through the entire void and pressing down on the hundreds of platforms that existed in the void. The reason was that they had absolute confidence in their own strength. They were confident that even if they were being probed by others, they could easily defeat all opponents. That kind of unbridled display of their strength revealed domineeringness, so no sect dared to treat it lightly. However, it was also because of this domineeringness that many sects didn't dare to recklessly probe those sections. Instead, they carefully used some extremely obscure methods to obtain information about those sections. After all, they didn't want to directly provoke the anger of such domineering sects and make those sects show no mercy when they encountered them. Although the elimination battles were randomly selected, who knew when they would encounter those sects? No matter how one looked at it, using one's perception to probe directly was an impolite behavior. If one used it without scruples, it would definitely arouse dissatisfaction, although the winner of the elimination battles would definitely be determined. However, it didn't say that one had to completely crush or destroy one's opponent to obtain victory. As long as one's opponent admitted defeat, one could still determine the winner. Whether a powerful opponent showed mercy and was willing to accept one's surrender was the difference between life and death for sects that felt that they weren't strong enough. Although Luo Fan didn't have such scruples, he didn't use his perception to probe those sects without scruples either. He wasn't afraid, but he didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble and attract too much hatred before the battle. In the next 3 years, there were more and more platforms in the void. Finally, after 3 years, all 5,019 platforms finally appeared in the void. And although Luo Fan's perception was extremely sharp, those sects were clearly very cautious. As soon as they appeared in the void, they used their treasure light to cover the platforms where their sects were located, making it difficult for Luo Fan to see the losses of those sections. He could only make a slight guess based on the strength of the treasures of those sections. When all the victorious sects appeared, the second round of elimination battles began. Because the number of sects was 5,019, there was a sect that directly passed through the second round. Originally, Luo Fan didn't have any expectations for this spot, but the final result made him a little dumbfounded. The light enveloped all the sects, but only missed the hidden armor sect's platform. Finally, when the light faded, there was only the hidden armor sect's platform remaining in the void. The other platforms, the other sects, all of them had disappeared. The result was obvious. The hidden armor sect had obtained a 5/19 chance of getting a bye. Without needing to fight, they directly passed the second round, becoming one of the 2,510 sects that would participate in the third round of eliminations. And when all the sects except for the hidden armor sect disappeared, the platform that the Hidden Armor sect was on suddenly underwent a strange change. An even more magnificent light spread out from the platform, and the entire platform became even more stable. The yuan qi on it also became even denser. This was a change that would only occur after a victory over an opponent. This caused everyone to no longer have any doubts. They knew that the Hidden Armor sect really did not need to fight to obtain victory. When they discovered this fact, the people of the Hidden Armor sect could not help but be stunned for a long time before they let out a cheer, thanking the heavens and earth, thanking fate for blessing them like this. Although Luo Fan did not care about this, he still had a smile on his face. Although he had absolute confidence that he could defeat his opponent in battle, being able to avoid a battle was naturally a good thing. Just as the cheers of the Hidden Armor sect had yet to disperse, another flash of heavenly light appeared in the skies. Then, an even more magnificent platform appeared in the skies. This platform was not concealed by any treasure light. It was the same as the sects that had not concealed themselves before. Such a fact was very obvious. In just a short while, this powerful sect had actually defeated their opponent and obtained the victory of the second round of elimination. How is this possible? A minor completion quasi-saint from the Hidden Armor sect could not help but exclaim, "Nothing is impossible." This elimination battle is not a battle of life and death. As long as they display their absolute strength, their opponent will naturally admit defeat and give up if they feel that they are not strong enough. Eldest senior brother Na Suzerain was very thoughtful and explained with a sigh. A sect with 9 major completion quasi-saints, 3,000 disciples who did not suffer any losses in the preliminaries and the first elimination round. And the weakest disciple is an early completion quasi-saint, while the majority of the disciples are minor completion quasi-saints, has the qualifications to make other sects admit defeat. Luo Fan faintly smiled and explained. Hearing Luo Fan explain the strength of that sect, the people of the Hidden Armor sect all sucked in a breath of cold air. Clearly, they were shocked by the strength of that sect. In the past 3 years, that sect had not concealed its strength at all, allowing other sects to investigate. However, those who could and dared to investigate were only the strongest of the various sections. For example, even eldest senior brother Na Suzerain did not dare to casually investigate the people of the Hidden Armor sect, let alone the disciples of other sections. Thus, even though they had been in the same space as them for 3 years, the people of the Hidden Armor sect did not have a clear understanding of the strength of that sect. Now that they heard Luo Fan say this, how could they not be shocked when they found out that the strength of that sect was actually to this extent? The sect that appeared was rather surprised that the Hidden Armor sect was stronger than them, but that was all. Soon, they understood why this sect would appear in the void before them. A disdainful expression was revealed from the platform that the sect was on, but it was only for a moment. Clearly, in the eyes of that sect, a sect like the Hidden Armor sect was not worth paying too much attention to. In the next few days, one sect after another defeated their opponents and appeared in the void. The first to appear were naturally the sects that did not conceal their strength at all. However, there were also several sects that used treasure light to conceal their strength. They completed the second elimination round at a speed that was not much slower than the first and appeared in the void. Clearly, it was not the other sects that used treasure light to block all probing. Rather, it was the sects that were far weaker than the sects that disdained to use treasure light to block their platforms. The reason they used treasure light to block their platforms was not because they lacked confidence, but because their style was different from the sects that had come before them. Chapter 977. This time, they only had to wait for more than a year for the victors of the second round of the competition, 2,510 sects, to appear in the void after completing their battles. Although the number of sects had been reduced by more than half, because the platforms of each sect were several times more magnificent than they were at the end of the first round, the entire void didn't seem empty at all. Instead, because of the brilliant light and powerful auras that filled the void became even more lively. As the final 2,510 sects appeared in the void, the light that hadn't appeared for more than a year suddenly enveloped the entire void, covering the platforms of the 2,512 sections. Then, the void changed and time changed. In the blink of an eye, Luo Fan and the others from the Hidden Armor sect had appeared in a completely different world. This world was incomparably vast. The stability of space and time here was countless times more stable than the last world they had experienced. Even eldest senior apprentice Brother Na Suzerain felt that his strength was subtly limited in this world, making it difficult for him to perfectly display his strength like he could in his sect. Even the power of his supernatural abilities seemed to be unable to reach their true limits. I didn't think that the heavens would fulfill my wishes and that I would actually meet you. With your strength, you were actually able to pass through the first 2 rounds. Your luck truly defies the heavens. At this time, a voice that everyone from the Hidden Armor sect was extremely familiar with spread into their ears. For the people from the Hidden Armor sect, after stepping onto the battlefield of this 3rd round, apart from the strongest powerhouse from Tianji School, there was no one else that could be familiar to them. How could it be anyone else? It was clear that this time it was unknown whether it was their luck that had run out or whether it was their luck that had run out. The Hidden Armor sect and Tianji School had bumped into each other and were about to engage in a fierce battle to determine who could pass and enter the 4th round. Only then would they have a chance to obtain the remaining qualifications to participate in the next round. Luo Fan frowned. With a thought, his sense spread out towards the source of the voice. In this world, in a place extremely far away from where they appeared, there was a platform floating in the void. There was an aura that Luo Fan was very familiar with. At the same time, he sensed the figure of the Tianji School's great perfection quasi-sage. At this moment, compared to before, Tianji School was in a much worse state. There were less than 500 disciples left in that sect, and all of them were injured. With a single glance, one could tell that they had paid a great price in order to make it to this round. It seems your luck isn't that good. Luo Fan smiled and said. Such strength was even weaker than the opponents that the Hidden Armor sect had encountered in the 1st round. To provoke them with such strength was no different from courting death. The strongest man from Tianji School frowned. He was a great perfection quasi-sage. Moreover, he was at the initial peak of the great perfection of sage to be. No matter what, he had the right to suppress all intermediate stage quasi-sages and even cultivators who had just reached the major perfection of quasi-sages. However, his opponent, the one that he had provoked before, was only at the intermediate peak of the great perfection of sage to be. Even if a sect like that had more people than them, they definitely did not have the ability to fight against them. But even so, that person actually dared to say such words. He could not help but wonder if that person had cultivated his brain to the point where it was damaged. However, this was just a thought. This thought didn't stop him from acting. Their Tianji School was extremely powerful, much more powerful than the Hidden Armor sect. In fact, they were ranked in the top 3,000 in Dreamscape. Not to mention before the Hidden Armor sect met Luo Fan. Even after the Hidden Armor sect met Luo Fan, they wouldn't be able to match up to this ranking. However, in the previous rounds of battles, they first encountered a huge challenge in the preliminaries and lost many disciples. Then, in the first round of battles, they encountered a sect that was on par with them. After a bitter battle, they only defeated the opposing sect after the sacrifice of hundreds of initial peak of the great perfection of sage to be. After that, they didn't have the luck of the Hidden Armor sect. They encountered a sect that was even stronger than them. In the end, more than half of their original 1,000 people were killed. Only then did they defeat the sect that had suffered great losses. Only then did they have the opportunity to enter the 3rd round of battles. Under such circumstances, although the Tianji School kept talking arrogantly, they wouldn't treat their opponents lightly. The criticism of the Hidden Armor sect didn't linger in his mind for too long. He quickly gathered the power of all his disciples and formed a huge Tai Chi 8 trigrams in the air. This Tai Chi 8 trigrams was so huge that it seemed to cover the sky. It floated there and completely replaced the original platform, as well as all the disciples of the Hidden Armor sect on the platform. After the Tai Chi 8 trigrams appeared, it began to revolve unhurriedly. As it revolved, countless complex and esoteric characters began to form in the air. Like a river of characters, they constantly revolved around the Tai Chi 8 trigrams, forming an increasingly large vortex. The vortex was so mysterious that the moment it appeared, the entire world seemed to be under its control. Even the flow of yuan qi in this world, the quaking of the ground, the drifting of the clouds in the sky, and even the refraction and shine of light, were all affected by the vortex. It was as if everything was under its control. Then, Luo Fan felt the space and time around the Hidden Armor Sect's platform shift. There was an incomparably mysterious power that was changing space and time, wanting to shift the Hidden Armor Sect's platform to another location. This change happened extremely quickly, almost without any time at all. As soon as the vortex appeared, the people of the Hidden Armor Sect felt as if they had left their original position and were entering a land of death. Fortunately, it was only almost. This change didn't really take no time at all. Luo Fan reacted at this critical moment, and his heart moved. The puppet that he had refined appeared right in front of him. He raised his hand and punched the air. The sound of tearing silk resounded in the air. This entire scene caused the Hidden Armor Sect sovereign to feel a slight pressure. Feeling the power of his own supernatural abilities being suppressed, the space and time around him began to violently shake. After this shaking, cracks began to appear in the void, with the puppet's fist as the center. These cracks were like a giant spiderweb, covering the entire sky above the platform. Through these spiderweb cracks, one could faintly see what was behind them. This was an incomparably massive vortex of characters with the Tai Chi 8 trigrams at its center. At this moment, not to mention Luo Fan, even the people from the Concealed Armor Sect could tell that the mysterious energy just now was trying to pull the disciples of the Heavenly Arcanum Sect into the center of the huge whirlpool formed by the platform. In a vortex, the most destructive power was near the center, but it wasn't at the very center. Clearly, the position Tianji School wanted to pull the Hidden Armor Sect into was such a position. In other words, if Luo Fan didn't do anything, the Hidden Armor Sect would have fallen into the most dangerous situation. Perhaps they wouldn't even be able to organize a counterattack, and the entire Hidden Armor Sect would be instantly wiped out. With such a realization, how could eldest senior brother Na suzerain dare to be careless? With a roar, all the disciples of the sect instantly condensed into a giant golden-armored deity. Although this golden-armored deity was formed from a formation, upon closer inspection, it wasn't like the formations of ordinary sects, which directly condensed into the phantom of the golden-armored deity. Instead, it was divided into components. These components then formed the golden-armored deity. Thus, this golden-armored deity could also be seen as a formation version of a puppet. It was quite characteristic of the Hidden Armor Sect. Luo Fan swept his gaze over the golden-armored deity, a faint smile appearing on his face. This smile was just a simple smile. It didn't contain any disdain or praise, but was simply a smile of joy. He didn't care about the formation of the people from the Hidden Armor Sect. With a thought, the puppet he refined blasted out another punch. It still blasted at the position it had previously blasted out. In an instant, the spiderweb-like cracks suddenly expanded countless times. Starting from the center of its fist, the space continued to collapse and shatter, finally revealing a huge spatial hole. Behind this hole was a huge Tai Chi 8 trigrams, a huge vortex of words. Then, the puppet blasted out a third punch. An incomparably powerful fist force directly blasted out, splitting into two and directly slamming into the yin-yang eye of the Tai Chi 8 trigrams. It directly poured into it, causing the originally slowly rotating Tai Chi 8 trigrams to suddenly stagnate. Then, without any delay, it collapsed into countless light fragments. As the Tai Chi 8 trigrams shattered into pieces, the surrounding vortex of words completely disappeared in an instant, as if it had never existed. All the mysterious words directly collapsed. An incomparably mournful scream suddenly rang out. Then, a bloody figure appeared out of nowhere in front of Luo Fan, his hands carrying a despairing, killing intent as he blasted towards Luo Fan. This pair of hands carried a blood-red glow, and countless strange words revolved around them. As he blasted out, the void that his hands passed through seemed to be completely assimilated, turning into countless strange words that gathered around his hands. As for the void in front of his hands, it seemed like Mercury had fallen to the ground, naturally moving away from his hands as if the void didn't exist. This allowed his hands to approach Luo Fan in the fastest and most direct way possible. This person was none other than the strongest person in the Tianji school, the Great Perfection Quasi-Sage who had a conflict with Luo Fan and the Hidden Armor sect. Among the hundreds of people in the Tianji school, only this Great Perfection Quasi-Sage was left. The 3 punches from Luo Fan's puppet were extremely complicated to describe, but in fact, they happened extremely quickly. In fact, the total time taken was less than a 10,000th of a second. In such a short period of time, the students of Tianji school were still immersed in the mood of pulling their opponents into their formation to crush them. They had no time to resist at all. The fist had completely shattered their formation. At the same time, the students of Tianji school, who had no time to react, were smashed into smithereens along with the formation. Only the great accomplishment Sage-to-be was left. Due to his powerful strength, he was able to suppress the backlash from the shattering of the formation. Although he was both physically and mentally injured, he still had the ability to attack Luo Fan. Under normal circumstances, if the person who set up the formation was prepared, he would not be able to escape. No matter how harsh the formation was, when it was broken, it would be destroyed. It would also not allow all the people who set up the formation to perish along with it. After all, a formation was just a formation. If the person who set up the formation was prepared, he would naturally be able to forcibly withdraw at the moment when the formation was finally destroyed. That way, he would suffer the backlash from the formation itself and be seriously injured. However, he would not suffer the same fate as the formation because he was one with it. However, this time, the speed of Luo Fan's counterattack was too fast and intense. The students of Tianji school had no time to react. Since they suffered a fatal attack, they naturally died along with the formation. Faced with the attack of the strongest expert of Tianji school, Luo Fan suddenly had a thought. A time river suddenly rushed out of his head, followed the fist of the strongest expert of Tianji school, and rushed towards him. The strongest expert of Tianji school could sense the danger of the time river. He wanted to dodge, but he found that he was suppressed by the entire world and could not move for a moment. He was a great accomplishment quasi-sage. Even the suppression of the entire world could only slow him down for a moment. It was impossible for him to be immobilized for a long time. If he could wait for another moment, he would definitely be able to regain his freedom. Unfortunately, the river of time wouldn't wait for him at all. The moment he was slowed down, the time river had already drowned him. With a turn, it returned to the top of Luo Fan's head. Like a python that had swallowed a frog, it began to twist. It squeezed and changed. The original position of the great accomplishment quasi-sage had long since become empty. The great accomplishment quasi-sage had long since been swallowed into the time river. Just like the creator of the previous dreamscape, he had been absorbed into the mysterious universe. The creator, who had regained the power of his magic power, had died in the time river's universe, let alone the strongest expert of Tianji school, a great accomplishment quasi-sage born out of thin air in the dreamscape. He couldn't even hold on for more than a month before he was completely destroyed and turned into dust by the attacks of the countless experts in the inner universe of the River of Time. This was the first time Luo Fan had truly killed a living being in the Time River's universe. He had used the same method against his enemies before, but they had all been the masters of the dreamscape, the great accomplishment quasi-sage who had created the dreamscape. As a result, he had won every battle. However, at the very last moment, when he was about to kill his opponent, the master of the dreamscape would be awakened due to his impending death. He would disappear from the dreamscape and leave the Time River's universe through another method. This time, The strongest expert of the Celestial Arcanum sect was the first Great Perfection Quasi-Sage to be killed in the internal universe of Time Chang'e. At the instant that Great Perfection Quasi-Sage died, the Tianji sect's platform trembled violently. It turned into a beam of light that pierced through time and space, directly entering the Hidden Armor sect's platform. This caused the magnificence of the Hidden Armor sect's platform to double, and the stable aura of the platform became even more shocking. But this was only the change that should have happened after the Hidden Armor sect achieved victory. The change that surprised Luo Fan was actually appearing in the River of Time. The moment the great accomplishment Quasi-Sage of Tianji School was wiped out, the Time River suddenly surged. Then, the bright red luster on it suddenly brightened. At the same time, an indescribable feeling entered Luo Fan's mind. This feeling was complicated and chaotic. It seemed to be related to the trend of the times, but it also seemed to be related to reality and projection. It was so mysterious that it couldn't be described with words. In a trance, Luo Fan even felt that the shackles that prevented him from progressing in his cultivation realm seemed to have become fragile once again. The feeling of being unable to be broken became fainter and fainter. This change was clearly a sign that Luo Fan had taken another step towards the Transcendence realm. When he discovered this, Luo Fan was both happy and heartbroken. He was happy because he discovered this unexpected gain and learned of a way to become a Transcendence realm expert. What he felt heartache over was that he had wasted a Great Perfection Quasi-Sage in the previous battle, because he wanted to have a good time. If he had found this method previously and swallowed that great accomplishment Quasi-Sage into the Time River to kill him, then, thinking of this, his heart ached even more. Just as Luo Fan was feeling heartbroken, a heavenly light descended from the sky. It directly enveloped the platform and the entire Hidden Armor sect. Then, space-time changed. They gradually turned from illusion to reality and appeared in the void. Luo Fan quickly reacted. At the moment when he was about to completely appear in the void, his mind slightly moved, and a rich treasure light covered the entire platform, making all the probing from the outside world completely miss out. The Time River above his head and the puppets beside him also disappeared, making him look like the most ordinary person. There are actually more than 800 sects that have completed the battle. This is really shocking. Luo Fan scanned with his perception and discovered the number of sects in the void. He couldn't help but sigh. Chapter 978. After half a year, all 1,255 sects that defeated their opponents finally appeared in the sky. This time, the sects were no longer as relaxed as they were after the last round. Even the sects that didn't care about the other sects at all and didn't hide their platforms, 2 of them were unlucky enough to fight each other, and 1 of them was eliminated. Of course, the 2 sects' strengths were about the same. Though 1 of them eliminated the other, the remaining 1 was also in a difficult situation. However, he no longer concealed the strength of his own sect like before. Instead, he propped up a treasure light to conceal the platform where his sect was located, which was an extremely rare sight. Other than the 2 unlucky and powerful sects, the other sects all suffered losses. After all, although the final ranking of the sects was not determined in the 3rd round of the competition, there were only 1,255 sects under them. There were only 255 more sects than the top 1,000. In other words, as long as they successfully passed the 3rd round, they would have 1 foot in the top 1,000. In other words, they would have 1 hand on that spot. Under such circumstances, the various sects naturally gave their all to unleash the full strength of their sections. The battle was naturally extremely intense. Because of this, it was obvious that the losers would lose everything. As for the victors, most of them won by a great margin, and all of them suffered great losses. Therefore, after half a year, the many platforms that appeared in the void were all dim. Even though the platforms' lights were magnificent, they weren't as bright as before. Though the platforms were grand and magnificent, it couldn't hide the exhaustion and damage the sects had suffered. There weren't many strict rules for this round. as long as all the battles were over and all the sects that had the right to participate in the fourth round arrived. And so, the fourth round of the competition began. However, there was no delay to give the sects that finished too slowly some time to rest, just because of fairness. When the last sect appeared in the void, the heavenly light seemed to spread out from the platform of the sect, completely enveloping the 1,255 sects in the void. Then, space and time shifted, and 1,254 of the 1,255 sects disappeared. Only an ordinary-looking sect was left, and they were very lucky to be in the next round. As for that sect, it was only natural that it wasn't the Hidden Armor sect. After all, the Hidden Armor sect was only an ordinary sect. Being able to obtain one out of the 2 free passes was already a heaven-defying feat. How could this most important free pass be obtained by them? The sects didn't react in the beginning, but when the mysterious light gathered from the void, making their platforms even more beautiful and stable, they let out an earth-shattering cheer. It was already extremely difficult for this sect to make it through the third round. Originally, they were only hoping that they wouldn't be completely annihilated in the fourth round. Their sect had participated in the Sacred Region qualification battle more than once, and had accumulated a lot of knowledge. Compared to the Hidden Armor sect, they knew a lot more things. They knew very well that the fourth round of the competition was one of the most unpredictable rounds. This was because the number of sects under him was usually only around 1,000. Therefore, in this round, not only the victors would obtain the qualifications to enter the sanctuary. If the number of losers and victors added up to more than 1,000 sects after the battle, then the losers would have to compete for the right to enter the sanctuary. But if this round was over, if the number of losers and victors was less than 1,000, then, whether it was the losers or the victors, they would automatically have the qualifications to enter the sanctuary. Therefore, they knew very well that in this round, what mattered was not whether you could obtain victory, but whether you could survive after the battle. It depended on whether your sect would not be completely annihilated after being defeated. However, at this very moment, when an empty slot landed on their heads, this sect was like a pie that fell from the sky. In an instant, everyone lost the ability to control themselves. Cheers soared into the sky and filled the entire space, causing the space to become extremely lively. This sect didn't have any ambition to fight for the top 10. When the empty slot fell into their hands, they instantly made a decision. In the following battles, they would admit defeat at the beginning. Even if they could defeat their opponents, they would never take the risk to fight again. As long as they entered the top 1,000, they would have the qualifications to enter the sanctuary, and that was all they wanted. Just as they were cheering, light shone from the void, and one platform after another appeared in the void. Clearly, one sect after another had completed the fourth round of the battle and returned to the void. His speed was so fast that the sect that got by was naturally shocked. However, when they realized that the first to appear were sects that were so powerful that they did not even bother to use treasure light to conceal their strength, they completely understood what was going on. Their sects were not the only ones who had news of this battle. Most of the other sects also knew that the most important thing in the fourth round of the battle was to protect themselves and not to win. Thus, when those sects encountered these sects that even disdained to conceal themselves with the glow of treasures, even if they had the strength to fight against these sects, as long as they didn't have any ambition to fight for the top 10, then they would automatically admit defeat and wouldn't really fight against these sections. Obviously, even though those sects did not bother to use treasure light to conceal themselves, they were not arrogant enough to think that they could destroy all the other sects without suffering any losses. Since the other party forfeited, they could obtain victory without suffering any losses, so why not? That was why the current situation appeared. It seemed like they had only wandered around the battlefield for a while before returning to the void. The battle this time only lasted for half a month. In the end, it was not the other sects that appeared in the void, but the Hidden Armor sect. The reason for this was that Luo Fan's goal was different from the other sections. Even if the other sects were similar in strength, they would only test each other out. Unless they were equally matched, only then would they begin to fight and determine life and death. This method naturally made the battle much shorter than the previous rounds. In just a few days, it was enough for them to finish the battle. As for Luo Fan, he had discovered the use of the River of Time in the previous round. This time, he did not care about anything else. As soon as the battle started, he completely engulfed the sect that had two great perfection quasi-sages into the River of Time. Then, he used the River of Time to produce countless living beings to crush and kill them. This would obviously take a lot more time. This time, he was able to complete the battle in half a month, which was already twice as fast as the previous 1 month. At this moment, Luo Fan was quite satisfied. The bright red luster in his River of Time was much denser than before he entered the battlefield. Clearly, his River of Time had gained a lot of benefits from killing great perfection quasi-sages. Perhaps it had obtained a trace of the mysteries of the tide of time from the essence of the great perfection quasi-sages. Or perhaps through such a battle, he had deepened his understanding of the mysteries of the tide of time, which allowed the River of Time to improve. The shackles that originally prevented him from improving his cultivation realm were still there, but the unbreakable charm was already faintly discernible. It was almost like the shackles had become ordinary shackles. It was still extremely stable. It cannot be broken, but it gave Luo Fan more hope. If this goes on, I might be able to break the shackles after devouring 10,000 great perfection quasi-sages, Luo Fan thought as he weighed the shackles. 10,000 great perfection quasi-sages. This seemed extremely exaggerated. After all, the entire dreamscape was the dreamscape of a great perfection quasi-sage. However, don't forget, there were sanctuary experts in this dreamscape. Here, there were thousands of greater perfection quasi-sages who wanted to fight for the right to enter the holy region. In this way, one could roughly guess the number of great perfection quasi-saints in the holy region without even thinking about it. He did not believe that he could not find 10,000 great perfection quasi-sages for him to kill. Of course, this was just a thought. Luo Fan was not arrogant enough to think that he could kill great perfection quasi-sages in the sanctuary. When Luo Fan and the Hidden Armor Sect's platform appeared in the void, a heavenly light enveloped the entire void and all the sects in the void. Then, a thought was transmitted into the minds of all the cultivators in the sects. After 4 rounds of battles, the remaining 936 sects have met the requirements. All the remaining sects will be qualified to enter the sacred region. The 628 sects that win will obtain the right to continue fighting for the opportunity to meet the sage. The remaining 312 sects will not have the right to continue fighting. After 10 breaths, they will leave the battlefield and return to their sections. All the sects that win will have a chance to choose. If they choose to continue fighting, after entering the sanctuary, they will obtain a territory that is 10 times more than the standard territory. If they give up on continuing fighting, they will leave the battlefield, but the territory they obtain will be limited to the standard territory. Please choose carefully. Friendly reminder: continue fighting, regardless of life or death. If your sect is completely destroyed, you will lose the right to enter the sanctuary. After this message was transmitted, the expressions of all the people in the sects changed. Some of the higher-ups of the sects were overjoyed, while others were very hesitant. Most of the sects that were overjoyed were sects that were satisfied with the chance to enter the sanctuary. Most of them were sects that had already failed but still retained their sect strength. And those sects that were hesitant were all the sects that had won. It was precisely because they had won that they needed to make a choice and had the right to choose. Among all the sects that had won, there were only a few dozen sects that were ambitious and qualified to compete for the top 10 positions. The other sects all understood that their goal in participating in this battle was to obtain the right to enter the sanctuary. Of course, if they could occupy a wider territory after entering the sanctuary, that would be for the best. And this was the root cause of their hesitation. According to what the message said, if they continued fighting, even if they lost, they would be able to obtain a territory that was 10 times more than the standard. This seemed to be extremely tempting, but there was also the fact that if all the members of the sect were destroyed, they would lose the right to enter the sanctuary. This made it difficult for them to choose the sects that were able to come here. None of them were sects that did not know their place. Therefore, while they were hesitating, many of the sects that had made up their minds and decided not to continue fighting. They decided to leave right away. Among them was one of the sects that had gotten a bye in the 4th round. In the end, after 10 breaths, the sky disappeared, and there were only 163 sects left in the void. The other sections, both the victors and the losers, had disappeared without a trace. They had all left the battlefield and returned to their sections. They actually don't even have the slightest intention to challenge themselves. Even if a sect like this enters the saint level, they will only be at the bottom of the hierarchy, a sect that can be trampled on by others. At this moment, a disdainful comment echoed in the void. It came from a greater perfection quasi-saint, from one of the sects that did not conceal their strength at all. Although the voice was not loud, and it was not transmitted to everyone's ears through any means, most of the cultivators in the void heard it, because he did not conceal it all. Luo Fan showed a disapproving expression when he heard the voice. This sect might know a lot about the sanctuary. However, he did not know what the sects below him were thinking. Being able to step into the sanctuary was already the greatest victory for them. Although it seemed like they would be able to obtain endless benefits by participating in the upcoming battle, they had to risk their lives and their greatest victory in order to obtain these benefits. As long as the sects were fully aware of their own strength, they would have to risk their lives and their greatest victory. As long as the sects had a good understanding of their own strength, they would make the same choice. Elder Luo, why don't we leave as well? This battle is ever-changing. If we encounter a powerful sect that is unwilling to accept our defeat, wouldn't we have to pay with our lives? The sect leader of the Hidden Armor sect said in a low voice next to Luo Fan. Sect leader, there is no need to boost the morale of others and belittle our own. In my opinion, these sects are just clay chickens and pottery dogs. Why worry? Luo Fan said with a smile. The sect master's face flashed with anger and helplessness. The other elders next to the sect leader also had indescribable expressions on their faces. There seemed to be helplessness, anger, and even a faint trace of hatred. The Hidden Armor sect was obviously just a sect that was satisfied with the qualification to step into the sanctuary. Previously, the sect leader had wanted to directly leave the battlefield and return to the sect, but he found that Luo Fan had already chosen to stay on the battlefield and continue fighting. This made him so angry that he almost fell out with Luo Fan. But because he had misgivings about Luo Fan's strength, coupled with the fact that he still needed Luo Fan to change his mind and choose to leave, he endured it and humbly came to Luo Fan's side, hoping that Luo Fan would change his mind. Luo Fan looked at their expressions and smiled. The time is up. Even if I want to change my mind, it's already too late. Na Suzerain's face flushed red, his eyes flashing with rage. His aura erupted, his anger condensing into a tangible substance that constantly spread out, almost filling the entire platform in the blink of an eye. In addition to him, the other people from the Hidden Armor sect also looked at Luo Fan with incomparable anger. The desire to tear Luo Fan's corpse into 10,000 pieces was something that could be seen with the naked eye. Luo Fan, do you have an irreconcilable hatred towards my Hidden Armor sect? Na Suzerain spat out these words one at a time. There is no enmity or hatred between us. Luo Fan's expression remained calm as he replied. Since there is no enmity or hatred between us, my Hidden Armor sect believes that we have treated you well. Why do you want to kill us? Na Suzerain roared. Fortunately, there was the light from the treasure. Otherwise, the 163 sects in the void would have discovered the abnormality here. Huh. Luo Fan's expression did not change. He chuckled, but his aura pressed down on the people from the Hidden Armor sect without reservation. In an instant, everyone from the Hidden Armor sect felt as if the entire world was pressing down on them. Everyone felt that whether it was their body or strength, even their perception or will, they were all completely frozen, unable to move at all. Even their thoughts seemed to have become incomparably slow. Only at this moment did they remember just how powerful and terrifying this person in front of them was. Although Luo Fan's cultivation was only at the peak of the Tao integration realm and seemed to be on the same level as the sect master of the Hidden Armor sect, one mustn't forget that Luo Fan was a powerful existence that had even killed a large success quasi-sage. How could his aura be compared to Na's suzerains? Even if they were on the same level, he could still easily crush them, making everyone from the Hidden Armor sect feel an unbearable pressure. Luo Fan's aura continued for several breaths. Then he slowly retracted his aura. He looked like the most ordinary mortal, without any abnormalities. But everyone from the Hidden Armor sect looked at him with indescribable fear in their eyes. The anger in their hearts had completely disappeared. Na's suzerain clenched his teeth, turned around, and retreated with the other elders. It was as if the accusations against Luo Fan had never happened. Chapter 979. Luo Fan had an indifferent expression on his face. After he retracted his aura, he made no attempt to appease the crowd. He simply stood there as if nothing had happened. 138 looking at the bookshelf, 138 looking at the bookshelf. Because of the concealment of the light released by Luo Fan, the Hidden Armor sect's platform did not exist to the other sections. If they knew, perhaps they would be even more disdainful of the Hidden Armor sect. After Luo Fan suppressed all the dissenting opinions in the Hidden Armor sect, light fell from the sky, directly enveloping the 163 magnificent platforms in the sky. Following that, apart from one platform that was lucky enough to be spared, the other 162 platforms instantly disappeared. When they reappeared, they were scattered across 81 worlds, facing each other in pairs. This time, the Hidden Armor sect, or rather, Luo Fan's luck was quite good. His opponent was a sect with 3 large success quasi-saints. After experiencing the first few rounds of the competition, the Hidden Armor sect still had the confidence to continue fighting. It was clear that they were quite confident in their own strength. And for a sect with such confidence, it was impossible for them to lose too many people in the first few rounds of the competition. Thus, at this moment, the sect that Luo Fan faced had a total of 2,300 people. From the start of the preliminaries until now, they had only lost around 600 people. Let alone the Hidden Armor sect. They were only slightly weaker than the other sects that disdained to conceal their strength. The world that these two sects appeared in was a world of oceans. Below the entire world was a boundless ocean. Apart from this, there was nothing else. What land? There were no islands, nothing at all. Not even a speck of soil could be seen in the entire world. In fact, when Luo Fan's vision pierced through the ocean and looked at the seabed, he discovered that what existed at the seabed was not the mud of an ordinary ocean, but compressed and condensed into a solid state. This was seawater that was different from ice. The density of this solid was many times greater than that of solid seawater, such as ice. It was unknown how thick it was, but it was spread out on the seabed, acting as the bottom of the entire world. The origin chi that filled the world was not normal origin chi. Instead, it was a strange origin chi that resembled gaseous water. Amidst such yuan chi, the power of any water-related divine ability would be greatly enhanced, while the power of any divine ability that was incompatible with the water would be greatly limited. In fact, there were even deeper restrictions beneath the surface of the divine ability's nature. This kind of restriction made it necessary to change the way one used their abilities in this world in order to successfully unleash their power. Luo Fan's mind moved slightly, and in an instant, all the changes in this world were completely integrated into his mind. He was already at the end of the Tao integration stage. Next was transcendence. The changes in the world had little effect on him. With a thought, he understood the changes in the laws of the world, how to use divine abilities, how to unleash the original power of divine abilities, how to make use of the characteristics of this world itself. He no longer had any doubts about greatly increasing the power of his divine ability. If Luo Fan was called a transcendent, he could even skip the process of thinking at this moment. No matter what world he appeared in, he would be able to unleash his full power and push the power of his divine ability to the limit. Only then would he be able to truly transcend. Unlike Luo Fan, this great accomplishment sage to be in the dream world was already at the transcendence realm. However, it was not the transcendence realm after all. The divine abilities of this realm were extremely powerful. They had the power to destroy heaven and earth and create all living things. With a thought, they could even make a Tao integration stage cultivator beg for death. However, they were still restricted by the world. In the previous few rounds of the world battlefield, the great accomplishment sage to be had been restricted because their level was not high enough. However, the restriction was similar to the restriction imposed on Luo Fan in this world. With a thought, he could see through the restriction and unleash his full power. However, in this round, the world had been strengthened to an unimaginable level. Even a perfect heaven and earth could not be compared to it. In such a world, the restriction imposed on great accomplishment sage to be had been strengthened to an indescribable level. Those great accomplishments sage to be would need some time to comprehend it and unleash their full power. It was precisely because of this feeling that the sect did not immediately launch an attack after appearing in this oceanic world. Instead, they set up a defensive formation, intending to comprehend the laws of this world before launching an attack. Clearly, Luo Fan did not know how to be modest in battle. He also did not know the concept of mercy between cultivators in this dream world. Seeing that the other sect had 3 great accomplishments sage to be had activated their defenses and wanted to defend themselves, Luo Fan did not know what was going on. How could he not understand what was going on? With a chuckle, with a thought, his figure crossed almost the entire ocean in an instant. He disappeared from the platform of the Hidden Armor sect and appeared outside the platform of the other sect. Although the great accomplishment sage to be in the sect was focused on comprehending the mysteries of this world, they were still great accomplishment sage to be and did not completely lose their perception of the outside world. How could they not be aware of Luo Fan's unscrupulous appearance here? Regardless of the fact that he still could not unleash the full power of his magic power, he roared, and 3 water-type magic powers burst out from where they were. A huge water-type thundercloud, a ferocious water dragon, and countless thin ice blades instantly drowned the place where Luo Fan was. There was a faint smile on Luo Fan's face. A bright red river appeared above his head out of thin air. This bright red river was very mysterious. It seemed to be extremely stable in the void, but it also seemed to be constantly changing. Every change and every circulation seemed to contain some kind of supreme and profound mystery and truth between the heavens and the earth. The bright red on it was very bright. Anyone who saw this long river would only notice the bright red in an instant. No matter how mysterious and incredible the long river was, it could not attract their attention at all. Everyone could feel an indescribable sense of control within this bright red light. It was as if they had been enveloped by this bright red light and were already in the control of this thing that emitted this bright red light. This was their life, their fate. It was as if they were no longer in control of everything. Under this bright red river, the water-type thundercloud, the huge and mighty water dragon, and the countless ice blades seemed to have encountered a black hole and disappeared without a trace in an instant. However, it was completely swallowed by the bright red river. There wasn't the slightest bit of resistance. It must be known that of the 3 magic powers, whether it was the water-type thundercloud, the water dragon, or the ice blades, if they were to unleash the full power of any one of them, a great 1,000 realms would be instantly destroyed. Due to the water-type Yuan Qi in this world, its power would be greatly enhanced. Although this world was more stable than a perfect heaven and earth, the full power of any of the magic powers could be unleashed. It was enough to turn the void within a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles into powder. Even time could not withstand the impact and was distorted. Rupture. However, these 3 magic powers were swallowed by the bright red river with a slight tremble and disappeared without a trace. It was easy to imagine how shocking this change was to the living beings in the sect. For a moment, the noisy platform of the sect fell silent. Apart from the three great perfection quasi-sages, everyone else was dumbfounded. Clearly, they could not believe what had just happened. Even the three great perfection quasi-sages were shocked. They didn't even have time to look at each other before they rose up and turned into three streams of light that charged at Luo Fan. Clearly, they had given up on the idea of comprehending the mysteries of this world and decided to fight Luo Fan directly. As for why they did not gather the power of the entire sect to defeat their opponent, there was no need to explain. Clearly, they did not have enough time. It must be known that apart from the three of them, many other people in the sect could not bear the impact of what had just happened. Their minds were blank. Under such circumstances, how could they let them help them fight? In the face of the extremely dangerous and powerful aura, Luo Fan's expression did not change in the slightest. With a thought, the river of time above his head trembled slightly. In an instant, it seemed to surpass time and space. It directly appeared around the three streams of light and wrapped around them. The three streaks of light reacted extremely quickly. They moved in three mysterious trajectories in the void, easily and mysteriously bypassing the bright red river. If the river had remained unchanged, they would have really bypassed it by moving in this manner. But it was clear that it was impossible for Luo Fan's river of time to not have changed at all. The moment the three streams of light went around, the river of time also turned slightly, directly blocking in front of the three streams of light. No matter how the three streams of light changed, it did not show any signs of giving up. It easily swallowed the three streams of light into the river of time and brought them into the universe within the river of time. Finally done. The moment the three streams of light disappeared into the river of time, Luo Fan was slightly happy. Such a thought flashed through his mind. Then he turned the river of time again and dove into the platform below. He looked around, and before the people of the sect could react, he had already swallowed all of them into the universe within the river of time. Although the people of this sect were extremely powerful, and many of them were even stronger than the eldest senior apprentice brother and the sovereign of the Hidden Armor sect, they were still far from being able to compare with Luo Fan. Even if they were to face Luo Fan in a normal battle, they still wouldn't be able to respond, much less when they were still in a state of shock, their minds still blank. Naturally, they had no ability to resist. Everything that had happened, from the moment Luo Fan appeared on the platform to the moment he swallowed all the people of the sect into the river of time, seemed to have taken a long time. But in truth, only a few 10,000th of an instant had passed. At this moment, the people of the Hidden Armor sect didn't even have time to clearly see the world around them. Luo Fan's figure flickered. He had already traversed more than half the world and appeared on the platform of the Hidden Armor sect. And at this moment, in the eyes of the people of the Hidden Armor sect, Luo Fan hadn't even disappeared. The time that Luo Fan had disappeared was far too short. From the platform, Luo Fan's figure was only a faint blur. It became clear once more and was naturally difficult to discover. However, not everyone was as shallow as him. The Hidden Armor sect master could see that there was something different about Luo Fan. He knew that after that flash, a bright red river had appeared above Luo Fan's head. He also saw that in the distance, there seemed to be some inexplicable change occurring in his opponent's sect. It was as if the sect had lost its vitality. Could it be impossible? At this time, how could he have defeated his opponent even faster than in the previous rounds? At this moment, the sect master's mind was filled with such a thought that made him feel like 100 claws scratching his heart. He wanted to ask, but when he thought of the conflict with Luo Fan, he reluctantly suppressed his doubts. Luo Fan could see the doubts in the Hidden Armor sect master's mind, but he had no intention of giving him an explanation. It wasn't that he had any misgivings about the previous conflict. To him, that conflict wasn't anything at all. It was just a demonstration of his strength. Compared to before, his feelings towards the Hidden Armor sect hadn't changed in the slightest. How could he care about what happened before? The reason he didn't explain was because he was too lazy to. It was just that he was too lazy to explain. In any case, regardless of whether he explained or not, the Hidden Armor sect master would always know what had happened. Why waste his saliva? For the next 10 days, The people of the Hidden Armor sect were all nervous. They all made their most perfect preparations and prepared to activate their defensive formations at any time. They all prepared to attack the positions of their defensive formations and prepared to engage in the most dangerous of battles. As for Luo Fan, he calmly floated in the void. His eyes were closed, as if he were in a trance. The bright red river above his head was mysterious and profound, as if everything was under its control. For the last 10 days, there hadn't been the slightest change. On the 10th day, Luo Fan suddenly opened his eyes. A faint smile appeared on his face as he said, "I've finally completed it. It seems that I've made considerable progress since last time." As he spoke, the river of time above his head suddenly shuddered. The bright red color on it seemed to brighten a little, and the shape of the river seemed to become even more mysterious. At the same time, Luo Fan felt that the shackles that shackled his cultivation seemed to have inexplicably weakened, as if the difficulty of breaking them had decreased a little. "I've completed 3. There are still 9,997 left." Luo Fan spat out words that only he himself knew, but the others were confused. They had no idea what he was referring to. At the same time, in the distance, the platform of the opponent's sect that had been floating in the void for 10 days suddenly trembled. It turned into a beam of light that shot through the void and directly entered the platform of the Hidden Armor sect. The platform of the Hidden Armor sect suddenly trembled and doubled in size. At the same time, it became even more beautiful and stable. At this moment, after going through several changes, the platform had become like an inverted mountain that was millions of feet tall. It looked extremely shocking. Along with these changes, heavenly light descended from the skies, directly covering the platform of the Hidden Armor sect. All sorts of changes occurred, causing the people of the Hidden Armor sect to feel as if they were in a dream. They had already experienced these changes several times already. They naturally knew that this was a sign that they had won. But this was also why they felt as if they were in a dream. How could they have won? From the time they entered this world until now, nothing had happened at all. How could they have won after waiting for 10 days? Could it be that this battle was all about perseverance? Who could last the longest? There was no need to mention what the people of the Hidden Armor sect were thinking. After the heavenly light covered the platform, space and time changed, and they vanished from this strange world of water. When they reappeared, they were in the void that they were incomparably familiar with. At this time, in the void, there were already a total of 81 platforms. In other words, the Hidden Armor sect was the last sect to complete their battle. The moment that the Hidden Armor sect appeared in the void, the heavenly light covered the entire void, covering all the sects within. Then a thought spread out from the heavenly light, pouring into the minds of all the people of the sections. In this round of elimination battles, 163 sects participated and 162 sects remain. 81 sects have won. 1 sect has a bye, and 1 sect has been eliminated. The eliminated sect will lose everything, and their original territory will be divided into the winner's sect. The loser will obtain 10 times the amount of territory, and the winner will obtain 900 times the amount of territory. The following battles will continue like this. The winner will obtain 90 times the amount of territory of the loser, and the loser's territory will not change. All sects, please grasp this for yourselves. This thought was transmitted into the ears of all the sects, causing their expressions to change drastically. Many high-level figures of the sects revealed looks of regret. They were all high-level figures of the defeated sections. The reason that in the previous round of elimination battles, only the Hidden Armor sect was left in the end was very simple. It was because those sects hadn't fought with their full strength, because they didn't know how much the distribution of territory would increase after the battles. They believed that even if they won, it would only be 1 or 2 times more territory than if they lost. This was clearly not worth the risk. Thus, in a battle, once they felt that it would be difficult for them to defeat their opponent or that they would have to pay a great price to win, they would negotiate with their opponent and either admit defeat or pay some price to have their opponent admit defeat. Like this, they were able to complete all the battles in a short 10 days. But They never imagined that there would be such a difference between victory and defeat. A difference of 90 times the amount of territory. This was like the difference between the heavens and the earth. How could they not feel regret? Chapter 980. If they had known that there would be such a difference between victory and defeat, they would have given it their all. Putting aside the fact that some of the sects were only slightly weaker than their opponents, and the outcome of the battle was still unknown, there were even a few sects that were stronger than their opponents. It was only because their opponents had shown that they would rather die than submit, so they were worried that they would lose more than they gained in the battle. That was why they had admitted defeat. Under such circumstances, how could the defeated sects not feel remorseful when they heard that there would be such a huge difference between victory and defeat? However, other than those sects that were defeated, there were a few sects that had a slight change in their expressions among the victorious sections. How could there be so many territories to divide? Usually, the victors would at most obtain 20 to 30 times the standard territory, which was only 2 to 3 times more than the losers. How did it suddenly become 90 times more this time? Could it be that something strange has happened in the holy region? In one of the victorious sects that did not conceal themselves at all, a greater perfection saged to be muttered with a change of expression. His voice was extremely soft, so much so that even the people in his sect around him did not hear it. Luo Fan had left a trace of his senses in the sect. Although it was only a soft voice, it was heard by Luo Fan without the slightest bit of loss. In an instant, a ripple was stirred up in his mind. It seems that there's really such a possibility. There's no way that there would be so much territory in the holy region for the newly joined sects out of nowhere. Therefore, the greatest possibility is that there's been a tragic war in the holy region. Many sects have perished, and the territory they occupied has been emptied. That's the only way. That's why there's so much territory. Such a thought appeared in Luo Fan's mind. After this thought flashed through his mind, Luo Fan did not look nervous at all. Instead, he smiled and his eyes flashed with eagerness. The reason for this was very simple. His desire to enter the holy region was different from that of the many sects in the dream realm. For the many sects in the dream realm, entering the holy region was for a better cultivation environment and a brighter future. But for Luo Fan, the reason why he entered the saint region was to find the great completion quasi-saint who created this dream world. To him, the cultivation environment didn't make much of a difference. In the previous few battles, he discovered that he could break through the shackles of his realm by killing great perfection quasi-sages. Needless to say, the war in the holy region was more beneficial to him than the peace and tranquility. Of course, the tragic war was more beneficial to him. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, the heavenly light once again enveloped the entire void. In the sky, the platform where the sects of the 82 victors were located began to distort slightly. In the end, time and space changed, and he disappeared from the void. In the entire void, only the 80 sects of the losers were left. Not long after, the sect that had been in the void previously and had been lucky enough to pass the previous round reappeared in the void. It was just that the light from the platform had dimmed a lot, and it looked similar to the platforms of the other sects in the void. Clearly, the sect had admitted defeat. Behind this sect, a dazzling and magnificent platform appeared in the void. That was obviously the opponent's sect corresponding to the previous one. In the next few days, apart from these two sects, no other sects left the battlefield and appeared in the void. It was very obvious that the battle that had occurred in the battlefield was extremely intense. However, it was not like the previous battles where they immediately admitted defeat when they realized that their strength was insufficient. Instead, they were all stimulated by the benefits of victory. They brought out the strength of their sects to the limit and used all methods to obtain victory. Only after nearly half a month did a sect appear in the void. This sect was none other than the Hidden Armor sect, the sect that Luo Fan temporarily attached himself to. At this moment, the platform that the Hidden Armor sect was on was even more magnificent than before. It was also twice as large and looked more stable. This time, the opponents that the Hidden Armor sect faced were similar to the previous ones. There were also 3 great perfection quasi-sages. However, this time, the great perfection quasi-sages reacted much faster than the previous opponents. The moment they stepped into the world, they gathered the power of the entire sect and attacked the entire Hidden Armor sect. Moreover, for some reason, the power of their attacks was unimaginably strong, as if the world was especially suitable for the Tao that the sect cultivated. Luo Fan had to spend a lot of effort to block their attacks, and then used all sorts of mysterious methods to swallow them into the river of time. Because of this, he had waited for more than half a month to end the battle and obtain the final victory. After this victory, Dai Changhe continued to obtain many benefits. The shackles on his cultivation continued to weaken, and he was a step closer to breaking through. Another 3. There are still 9,994 left. Luo Fan sighed in satisfaction and helplessness. The last time the Hidden Armor sect's sect master heard these words, he didn't understand what Luo Fan was talking about. But now, listening to him again, how could he not understand? For a moment, Na Suzerain looked at Luo Fan as if he was looking at a madman. At the same time, helplessness flashed in the depths of his eyes. The person before him actually planned to kill 10,000 great perfection quasi-sages. If he wasn't a madman, then what was he? But what made him even more helpless was that this madman was currently in control of the Hidden Armor sect. The life and death of the Hidden Armor sect was in the hands of this madman. What could be more helpless than this in this world? After the Hidden Armor sect finished their battle, the other sects also finished their battles and appeared in the void one after another. This continued until 3 years later. All of the 41 victorious sects appeared in the void. As for the defeated sects, they still managed to escape from the battlefield. However, there were only 26 sections. There were 15 sects that were completely destroyed by the victorious sections. Not only were they unable to obtain more territory, but they were also completely stripped of their qualifications to enter the sage domain. People die in pursuit of wealth, and birds die in pursuit of food, nothing more. When all the sects returned to the void, another heavenly light enveloped all the sects and transmitted a message. This message also told everyone that the victorious sects had increased their territory by 90 times. It had become 81,000 times the standard amount of territory. Such a harvest made the defeated sects feel helpless but not regretful. It made the victorious sects feel happy and satisfied. The defeated sects felt helpless because they couldn't obtain the benefits of victory. The reason why they didn't feel regret was even simpler. It was because they had already used all the strength of their sects and failed. It was just that their skills weren't as good as others. There was nothing to regret. The victorious sects felt happy and satisfied. After obtaining such benefits, even if they had to sacrifice a lot, they all felt that it was worth it. After the heavenly light, all but one of the 41 victorious sects had a bye. Apart from the direct victory, the other 40 sects all disappeared from the void. They were teleported to another space-time, another world, to engage in an intense elimination battle. This time, the Hidden Armor sect that Luo Fan was in only finished their battle after a whole month and returned to the void. As for the other sections, they were slower than them, only returning to the void after a whole year. Among them, there were 21 victorious sects and a lucky sect that had a bye. Of the defeated sects, only 18 returned to the void. 3 of them had completely disappeared, losing the right to enter the sage domain. Amongst the sects that disappeared, there was one that disdained to use treasure light to conceal the platform that their sect was on. The opponent they encountered was none other than the Hidden Armor sect, or more accurately, Luo Fan. That sect had 9 great perfection quasi-sages. Among all the participating sects, they could definitely be ranked in the top 10. However, when faced with Luo Fan, such a sect merely doubled the time it took for Luo Fan to finish them off. It only wasted a dozen days, but it was enough to nourish Luo Fan's river of time. It weakened the shackles on his cultivation, allowing him to take another small step towards a breakthrough. 9,985. At this moment, Luo Fan could no longer make the sect leader of the Hidden Armor sect think that he was a lunatic. Instead, he was looking forward to the moment when that number turned to 0. The disappearance of that sect shocked the remaining sections. The strength of a sect with 9 great perfection quasi-sages was definitely top-notch. In the void, there was no sect that had absolute confidence in defeating that sect. However, in just a year, that sect had disappeared without a trace. In fact, they couldn't even tell how much damage the sect that defeated them had suffered. Didn't this mean that there was another sect that could easily destroy them? How could they not be shocked? The benefits of this victory were also incomparably huge, allowing each of the victorious sects to obtain more than 7 million times the standard territory. No matter how small the standard territory was, with such a multiplier, it would become an unimaginably huge territory. This kind of benefit made the victorious sects pant. For a time, the entire void was filled with jealousy and excitement. Naturally, the ones who were envious were the defeated sects, while the ones who were excited were the victorious sections. This should be the last round. Although it's a pity to give up now, it's not worth the risk. Under the cover of the sky, such a thought flashed through Luo Fan's mind. There were still 21 sects left. Clearly, only 11 sects would be qualified to continue fighting after this round. To pick out the top 10 sects, there would naturally need to be at least 1 more round of battles. And to pick out the strongest sect, there would need to be at least 4 rounds of battles. If Luo Fan didn't have any misgivings, he would naturally be able to participate in 4 rounds of battles. He would be able to use the great completion quasi-sages of the 4 sects to help him break through to the next realm. Unfortunately, Luo Fan had many misgivings. He was afraid of facing that sage. Although these misgivings weren't strong enough to make him give up everything, it wasn't worth the risk for the great completion quasi-sages of the 4 sections. Thus, even though Luo Fan was extremely reluctant to part with the great completion quasi-sages of the 4 sects, he could only helplessly give up. This was what he was thinking in the mortal realm. As he waited for the time and space to change and enter the battlefield together, he suddenly discovered that the position of the Hidden Armor sect hadn't changed at all after the light. The entire sect's platform was still in its original position. Moreover, without any warning, the sect's platform had become even more magnificent and vast. More stable. This is a buy. Luo Fan thought to himself in disbelief. He looked around at the surrounding platforms that were covered by the light of treasures. Envious gazes shot over. Clearly, they really hadn't left or entered the battlefield. They really had a buy. How is this possible? We've already had a buy once. Luo Fan finally admitted this fact helplessly. He sighed and dispersed the sacred art he had prepared. He helplessly sat down cross-legged. When the people from the Hidden Armor sect discovered the current situation, they weren't as conflicted as Luo Fan. On the contrary, they were overjoyed and cheers soared into the sky. If it wasn't for the treasure luster concealing them, they might have already turned this entire space into an ocean of excitement. To the people from the Hidden Armor sect, every battle was a struggle between life and death. For them, every battle was a struggle between life and death. They didn't have Luo Fan's desire to fight, nor did they have the absolute pursuit of ranking. All they wanted was to leave safely. For Luo Fan, a buy was naturally an annoyance of punching empty air. But for them, it was extremely fortunate. How could they not cheer? How could they not be happy? Even eldest senior brother, Na Suzerain, couldn't suppress his joy. He was unable to suppress his joy, and his face was filled with excitement. Luo Fan glanced at them and couldn't be bothered to say anything. At this time, he had also thought it through. They were going to get a buy again. This seemed to be the second time, and it seemed like something that was impossible to happen. However, don't forget that there were thousands of sects that got a buy last time. It could be said to be a kind of extremely strong luck. But this time, there were only 21 sects left. Among the 21, the chances of the Hidden Armor sect being chosen were naturally very high. It wasn't impossible for them to be chosen to have a buy. What a pity, these sects have at least 4 or 5 great completion quasi-sages. Luo Fan sighed and thought to himself, next, They waited for more than a year before the sects left the battlefield one after another and appeared in the void. This time, almost every sect that had returned to the void had suffered great losses. Every sect looked extremely dispirited, and the number of people they had lost was even greater. After a year, when all 20 sects appeared in the void, the most victorious sect only had a little over 300 people left. This was only a tenth of what they had before entering the battle. One could imagine how great the losses were. And among the sects that failed, there were even a few that only had a few disciples left. From this, it could be seen how tragic the previous battles had been. When all the sects appeared, light shrouded the sky and a thought was transmitted. The moment the light shrouded the sky, Luo Fan directly transmitted a thought. The hidden armor sect feels that they are not strong enough and forfeits the right to continue fighting. Originally, he had only casually transmitted a thought and did not wait too long for a reply. In the end, he still decided to forfeit after entering the battle. Of course, the reason why he still transmitted a thought, even though he knew that there was little hope, was not complicated. It was because he did not want to forfeit in the middle of a battle. If he could end the battle under such circumstances, it would naturally be for the best. However, just as his thought was transmitted, a thought was transmitted into the minds of all the members of the Hidden Armor sect. The Hidden Armor sect forfeits the chance to face the Sage in the final battle. Are you sure? A friendly reminder. If you choose to forfeit, there will be insufficient spots after the battle, and no more spots can be added. Please choose carefully. When the members of the Hidden Armor sect sensed this thought, they could not help but look at each other. Previously, they had been extremely angry at Luo Fan for wanting to continue fighting. They felt that he was putting his life on the line and was courting death. They hated Luo Fan to the bone and wanted nothing more than to be thrown out of the battlefield. But at this moment, when Luo Fan placed such a choice in front of them, they felt a little reluctant. After all, they were only a small step away from meeting the Sage. In the following battles, they did not even have to win. As long as they could survive, they would have a very high chance of meeting the Sage. In this situation, how could they not feel a sense of fluke? Give up like this? Wouldn't that be too much of a pity? Why don't we try again? In any case, we don't need to win. As long as some of our disciples survive, we will have a very high chance of meeting the Sage. Eldest senior brother, Na Suzerain, braced himself and said to Luo Fan, "You can continue to participate, but I will not fight again," Luo Fan said lightly. Chapter 981. Chapter 1019. Saint Region. The moment Na Suzerain transmitted his thoughts into the heavenly light, the heavenly light suddenly trembled, and as it trembled, the entire void began to tremble violently. This trembling did not give off the feeling of destruction. Instead, it was full of vitality, as if it was caused by laughter. As it trembled, the entire void began to faintly echo with heavenly sounds. Then, from within the heavenly light, a thought was transmitted into the ears of every member of the various sects present. Because the Hidden Armor sect has given up on fighting, the remaining 10 sects have automatically become the top 10 sections. They now have the right to meet the Saint Region. The Saint Region qualification battle has come to an end. The top 10 sects will continue to challenge the rankings, while the remaining sects will return to their respective sections. After this thought, the heavenly light trembled. Before the many sects in the void could react, they felt space and time change. Apart from the top 10 sects, the other sects all disappeared, returning to their respective sects in the dream world. As the sect that had given up on fighting, the Hidden Armor sect received some extra preferential treatment. However, they only disappeared at the end to let the remaining 10 sects know which sect was so foolish as to give up on the right to meet the Saint Region. As for how the ranking battle would proceed, Luo Fan and the others from the Hidden Armor sect naturally did not have the mind to care. At this moment, they had already returned to the planet where the Hidden Armor sect was located. But the moment the team of more than 1,000 people appeared in front of the space-time portal, the entire planet instantly boiled over. Although the loss of more than 1,000 people was a great blow to the many members of the Hidden Armor sect, Such a loss was insignificant compared to the benefits they had obtained. It was enough to suppress all the sorrow they might feel, and it made them inexplicably excited, as if their lifelong dreams had been fulfilled. After arriving on the planet, Luo Fan could not be bothered to care about what they were thinking. He said to Na Suzerain, "We'll meet again when we enter the Saint region." With that, his figure flickered, and before the cultivators of the Hidden Armor sect could react, he had already disappeared without a trace. This time, he did not stay on the planet. Instead, he directly entered the central star of the galaxy and opened up a small world within it. He began to regulate his breathing and cultivate. The many disciples of the Hidden Armor sect felt both joy and surprise at Luo Fan's departure. However, regardless of whether he was happy or surprised, the result would not change. Our sect has obtained the 11th place in this contest. In 1,000 years, we will be able to enter this sanctuary. Although almost everyone knew what was going on, such a good thing naturally had to be properly announced. Thus, the Hidden Armor sect master suppressed all his emotions and announced to the entire star system. His voice spread throughout the star system, allowing every life form in the star system to clearly hear his words. They knew how powerful the Hidden Armor sect was and how great the future of the Hidden Armor sect was. His words spread throughout the galaxy. In an instant, the entire galaxy was in an uproar. All the life forms in the galaxy, no matter what they were doing, all cheered with excitement. No matter how exploited they were with the Hidden Armor sect, the fact that the Hidden Armor sect had entered the sanctuary was a great thing for them. If the Hidden Armor sect did not care about the mortals they exploited and entered the sanctuary, it would naturally be equivalent to liberating the many life forms in the galaxy. This was naturally a good thing. If the Hidden Armor sect wasn't willing to let them go and wanted to bring them into the sacred region with them, then that was naturally a good thing for them. After all, even if they were to be exploited in the incomparably beautiful sacred region compared to this mortal land, everyone knew which was better. It was precisely because of this mentality that they cheered from the bottom of their hearts. After the announcement, the Hidden Armor sect master began to get busy. Although there was still 1,000 years, the preparations that the Hidden Armor sect needed to make before moving the entire sect into the sanctuary were too much. 1,000 years seemed like a long time, but in fact, it was barely enough. There was not much time for them to waste. In the midst of this bustle, the entire galaxy began to move like a sophisticated machine, erupting with unimaginable power. The entire planet became incomparably lively and bustling. The entire preparation process was incomparably complicated. If it weren't for the fact that the many members of the Hidden Armor sect were extremely powerful cultivators, it would have been extremely simple for them to open up a small world to accommodate many resources and living creatures. This was why everything was so orderly and without much chaos. However, even so, by the time they were fully prepared, more than 900 years had passed. Soon, the time for the gate of the sanctuary to open was approaching. The gate of the sanctuary was the space-time gate that had sent the members of the Hidden Armor sect to the battlefield and transformed into a portal after they left. This portal was like a phantom engraved in the void, faintly discernible, seemingly real and illusory at the same time. Before the time limit was reached, it was like a phantom that could not be touched at all, let alone opened. The closer it was to the 1,000-year time limit, the more real and tangible the door felt. It was as if it had been constantly accumulating power in the past 1,000 years to open the passage to the sanctuary. On this day, when the gate of the Holy Land finally showed signs of becoming a physical entity, a ray of light suddenly flashed in the sun of the star system. It directly crossed the void and arrived on the planet. When it arrived in front of the gate, it suddenly descended and turned into the figure of a young man. This was naturally Luo Fan. Over the past 900 years, Luo Fan had been in the small world he had opened up on the sun. The small world was not large, but it isolated all the heat from the sun. The temperature was suitable, and it absorbed the power of the sun and transformed it into rich innate yuan qi and endless vitality. This made the environment of the small world extremely suitable for living creatures, and Luo Fan felt extremely comfortable in it. Luo Fan had been in the small world for more than 900 years, but he had not been doing nothing. Instead, he had been constantly exploring the mysteries of the dream world. Through his previous experiences, he had been searching for the true location of the Saint Domain. Due to the existence of the gate of the sanctuary and the traces left on his body by the changes in time and space during the previous battles, the originally untraceable and seemingly non-existent sanctuary had already revealed traces to Luo Fan. These traces were so subtle that even he could not directly find the way to the sanctuary. That was why he had stayed in the small world for more than 900 years. Fortunately, it wasn't as if he had gained nothing in the past 900 years. He had relied on his own perception of the sanctuary to refine his advanced sage-level puppet again, so that the puppet would be more adaptable. Although the power of the dream world did not increase by much, it should be able to exert more power in the sanctuary. The reason why he had done this was very simple. Back during the battles for the qualifications to enter the sanctuary, each round of the battles had opened up a new world as the battlefield. Each of those worlds was extremely mysterious and had completely different rules and laws, which had an almost irrepressible influence on cultivators. Either the cultivators who cultivated a certain technique would receive a boost in strength, or they would be suppressed and their strength would be greatly reduced. This seemed to be just a change in the battlefield, so ordinary people would let it go. However, what kind of existence was Luo Fan? How could he be as shallow as ordinary people? Of course, the change in the battlefield could not have appeared out of thin air. It must have had a source. The source of this was most likely the Saint region. In other words, the sacred region should also possess this kind of space-time suppression effect. If not, how could such a characteristic appear on the battlefield? Normally, Luo Fan would not have cared too much about this characteristic. He could have made up for it by comprehending it after entering the sanctuary. However, after guessing that the sanctuary was not peaceful at this time, how could he give up all the strength he could gain after entering the sanctuary? How could he make the puppet unable to exert its strength because of the change in the environment? It was also because of these reasons that such a thing happened at this time, and why Luo Fan spent more than 900 years to refine his puppet again. The reason why Luo Fan came to the door of the sanctuary at this time was because he had made a new discovery. There's still more than 10 years before I can really communicate with the sanctuary and open the door completely. However, this is no longer untraceable. A faint smile appeared on Luo Fan's face, and such a thought flashed in his mind. His eyes were fixed on the sacred region gate that seemed to be engraved in the void. The countless changes of the laws behind the sacred region gate were like the lines on his palm and his eyes. There was no concealment or concealment at all. They were directly and clearly displayed in his eyes and appeared in his mind. The countless laws were constantly changing at this time, and the endless mysteries of time and space, as well as the ultimate truth of the universe, were constantly being developed and displayed. If any of these mysteries and truths were taken out, it would be a supreme opportunity for any intermediate sage to be, and it would be enough for them to make a breakthrough in their cultivation realm. However, these countless mysteries were extremely simple in the eyes of Luo Fan, and there was nothing that puzzled him at all. Everything was so clear, and even the changes of the laws were within his expectations. In Luo Fan's eyes, these countless laws seemed to form a chain that was pulling a huge world hidden in the depths of time and space, a place that Luo Fan thought did not exist in the past. That world was so vast that even the universe of this dream world was like a drop in the ocean, insignificant compared to it. It would be more accurate to say that the chains were pulling the universe towards that world. The reason why he could sense that world now, which he could not detect before, was very simple. It was because the distance between that world and this universe had been shortened to the point where Luo Fan could see it clearly. I've been waiting for this day. Luo Fan sighed leisurely. His figure flickered and gradually disappeared. It had been more than 10,000 years since he entered this dream world. Although this time was extremely short for him, it was more than 10,000 years after all, which was not a small number. If there was no other way, he could naturally continue to wait calmly for the next dozen years. However, the sacred region was right in front of him at this moment. Even though it was a little far away, he did not want to waste any more time waiting. What he was doing at the moment was ignoring the door of the sacred region and directly heading toward that huge world with his own power, the sacred region. Luo Fan was currently at the end of the Tao integration realm, and he could even see the end of the Tao integration path. With such a cultivation realm, the power of his divine abilities had reached an unbelievable level. Even Khanate Zenith heavenly gods could be omnipotent as long as the conditions were met, let alone him. Normally, he could not see traces of the sacred region and did not know how to proceed, so he naturally had no other way. However, at this moment, since he had already seen the sacred region and sensed its existence, it was only a matter of time before he entered the sacred region. Therefore, although he had only seen the sacred region and could not even see the entrance to the sacred region, it was already enough for him to enter the sacred region. At the moment, the world in Luo Fan's eyes had completely changed. It no longer looked normal and had become a world completely composed of nomological laws. This world had the same nature as the original power perspective, except that it had been composed of nomological laws instead of power. Such a perspective was comprehended from the power perspective, and it was a manifestation of him gradually transcending the inheritance of Tao Venerate Vigor. Of course, in such a perspective, there were still many traces of the power perspective, and there was still a long way to go before he truly broke away from the power system and became independent. Fortunately, Luo Fan did not want to take the nomological law route. At the moment, this law perspective was already enough for him to use, but he did not need to be too demanding for perfection. In this world of nomological laws, the sacred region was no longer untraceable like a normal perspective. Instead, it was as bright and dazzling as a huge sun, so bright that it hurt one's eyes. Behind the door of the sacred region, a shackle extended and directly connected to the sun that represented the sacred region. Although the sun was bright and dazzling to the point that it hurt one's eyes, it was extremely far away after all. As a result, the shackle became extremely long, so long that its length could not be described with specific numbers. It was shocking and amazing. In this world of nomological laws, time and space were all formed by the nomological laws. This extremely distant feeling was not in terms of space, but the distance between the nomological laws. In other words, the place where Luo Fan was located and the huge sun were separated by many nomological laws, which was why it seemed so far away. Similarly, the length of the shackle was not in terms of space, but due to the extreme complexity of the nomological laws. Under such circumstances, if Luo Fan wanted to rush to the sun, what he needed was not to fly or walk, but to comprehend. He needed to comprehend the nomological laws that blocked him from the sun, so as to bypass the obstruction of the nomological laws and directly reach the sun. Naturally, Luo Fan was very clear about this. He sat cross-legged in this world of nomological laws, and countless mysterious information flashed through his eyes as he continuously analyzed the mysteries of the nomological laws in front of him. As he analyzed the mysteries of the nomological laws, the length of the shackle became shorter and shorter in his eyes, and the distance between him and the sun also became shorter and shorter. This kind of analysis process was a repetitive process. To him, it was actually just letting him have a deeper understanding of the power of the divine arts that he had mastered in the past. It would only slightly increase his combat power. His cultivation realm would not be able to break through because of this kind of analysis process. Therefore, Luo Fan's analysis process was extremely fast. It was not like cultivation, where he would summarize and deepen his understanding every once in a while. Instead, he simply analyzed and approached the sun that represented the sacred region. A year passed as he continued to analyze the data. At a certain moment, Luo Fan's body trembled, and he suddenly felt as if he was bathed in a scorching and mysterious sunlight. All the laws in his eyes formed a huge and inseparable whole, and it was extremely mysterious. Faintly, it revealed an aura that surpassed everything, and it was eternal and indestructible. In an instant, Luo Fan came to a sudden realization, and a look of joy appeared on his face. So, I've already arrived. With that thought in mind, he stood upright in the void and stretched out his arms slightly. The countless rules and laws that were entangled around him were like gossamer threads that he broke free from. Then, he took a step forward, and his figure was like an illusion as he squeezed into the huge body in front of him. In an instant, countless mysterious existences swept past his body, and the world in his eyes naturally broke away from the nomological law's perspective, and an indescribable suppression acted on his body. At the same time, everything around him seemed to become so wonderful and mysterious. When he took a slight breath, he felt rich vitality surge into his lungs, and his entire body felt so comfortable that he almost shivered. So, this is the sacred region. Luo Fan let out a long breath. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to subscribe and tip. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1019. Chapter 982. At this moment, what appeared before Luo Fan was a boundless world. This world was not like the world where the Hidden Armor sect was. It was a universe. This was a world where the sky was round and the earth was square. The entire world was a huge piece of land. One could not see the edge or the end of this land. The number of worlds, and continents that Luo Fan had seen was almost innumerable. Even the number of worlds that he had created was unimaginable. However, his eyes still lit up when he first saw this world with an orbicular sky and an orbicular square earth. At first glance, this world didn't seem to be anything special, and it seemed to be no different from the worlds he'd seen in the past. However, so long as he took a closer look, he would be able to notice that this world was filled with an extremely dense and strange aura that he'd never seen before. This aura was supreme, powerful, and noble. It also had a feeling that it could not be worn down by thousands of tribulations and was eternal. This aura was clearly the aura of a sage. However, even though this aura was supremely powerful, supremely noble, impervious to all tribulations, and eternal, it faintly contained a form of emptiness that was concealed extremely deeply. This faintness could only be sensed by someone like Luo Fan, who had seen what the mark of a sage looked like. To other cultivators who did not know what a sage looked like, this aura was the real aura of a sage. There was not a trace of faintness in it. Indeed, this great perfection quasi-sage has never seen a true sage before. No matter how strong this aura is, it can't be compared to a true sage. No matter how strong this aura is just a simulation. Although Luo Fan's eyes lit up, this thought still flashed through his mind. Although Luo Fan had the mark of a sage, he had not personally sensed the aura. However, as long as he could distinguish the trace of faintness in this aura, it was enough for him to confirm that the mysterious aura that filled the entire world was the aura of a sage in this dream world. However, it was essentially a simulation and not the real aura of a sage. This fact allowed Luo Fan to confirm that his initial decision was correct. Personally meeting a sage would not bring him any benefits. It was impossible for it to bring him any great benefits. Instead, it would cause extremely serious consequences that could even affect the direction of his cultivation. He couldn't help but secretly rejoice. With a slight thought, he sensed that the entire world around him seemed to have some kind of extremely subtle rejection towards him. This rejection did not appear directly, but it greatly weakened the power of his divine ability, making him feel a little powerless. It was as if the same divine ability could not be fully unleashed, and the entire world instinctively wanted to exclude the effects of his divine ability. In fact, even the great accomplishment quasi-sage realm puppet that he had crafted was faintly repelled and suppressed. However, because he had already been reforged, the rejection and suppression he felt was much smaller than when he was in his original body. The power that his divine abilities could unleash would also be several times stronger than what he could unleash himself. He sighed. He summoned his puppet and turned around. Then, he entered a small world that had been opened up inside the puppet. When he had crafted this puppet, he had put in as many as 365 universes. Although each universe was not truly complete, no matter how crude or incomplete it was still a universe. It was a puppet with 365 universes, so it was naturally extremely simple to open up a small world that could accommodate living beings within its body. The small world inside the puppet was not truly independent. It was placed within the entire sanctuary, so it was naturally under the absolute influence of the sanctuary. Therefore, although it was created by the puppet, it still repelled and suppressed Luo Fan. If he wanted to get rid of this repelling and suppression, he needed to do the same as he did in the sanctuary. He needed to comprehend the rules and laws and understand the great Tao of the sanctuary. In the end, he would be able to completely see through this influence and suppression. Then, he would be able to unleash his full strength in the sanctuary. What Luo Fan's main body did after entering the small world was exactly what he did. After all, his puppet was at the great accomplishment sage-to-be level. Naturally, it could not be the same as ordinary puppets. He only needed to give it a thought, and the puppet would naturally respond. It directly stepped into the void and began to explore the sanctuary. The sanctuary was vast and boundless. The place where Luo Fan appeared seemed to be a barren land. There was no sign of human habitation in the surrounding hundreds of millions of miles. There were only waves of powerful and violent auras of living beings occupying the mountains and rivers. A strong sense of danger surged towards the puppet. After all, the puppet had been refined by Luo Fan once. Although it was greatly suppressed in the sanctuary, it could still exert the strength of a great accomplishment sage-to-be. But even so, he could still sense that there were many powerful threats in those auras. Those were living beings that were equivalent to great accomplishment sage-to-be. These living beings were much less quick-witted than real intelligent living beings. Obviously, their intelligence was not comparable to that of real cultivators. However, it was also because of this that they were in even more danger. Ordinary cultivators, no matter how strong they were still rational. They would not recklessly exert their strength. They would not be unscrupulous in battle, and they would not attack a living being without any conflict of interest. However, these living beings that only had strength but no corresponding intelligence were different. Because they did not have corresponding intelligence, they could not exert their full strength. In other words, compared to ordinary cultivators of the same level, they had many weaknesses that ordinary cultivators did not have. However, their lack of rationality and restraint in exerting their strength was enough to make up for all these shortcomings. This made them more dangerous than cultivators of the same level, or even a level stronger than them. Luo Fan's puppet floated in the void, and its eyes shone with a faint light. Then, a thought entered its small world and was received by Luo Fan. There are 3 great accomplishment sage-to-be strange beasts within a radius of 50 million kilometers. Luo Fan received the thought. He could not help but be slightly stunned. After a moment of shock, an inexplicable smile appeared on his face. It seems that I can save the time needed to comprehend the laws of this world. With a slight thought, his will directly attached to the puppet. In an instant, the puppet became his body, and he became the puppet's will. Using the puppet's eyes, senses, and body to sense the world, he instantly locked on to the nearest great accomplishment sage-to-be strange beast. Compared to the puppet, this great accomplishment sage-to-be strange beast was much stronger. It was close to a small realm. However, as mentioned before, it was still a strange beast that lacked intelligence. Even if it was a small realm stronger than the puppet, it still had many weaknesses. Therefore, it was no longer wishful thinking for Luo Fan's puppet to defeat it. With a slight thought, the puppet's body shook, and the surrounding time and space shook and distorted. Then, his entire body leaped into the air and disappeared from where he stood. When it reappeared, It was above a swamp with a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers. The swamp was shrouded in thick black fog. It contained tens of thousands of poisonous gases and countless strange and tiny living creatures. If ordinary living creatures were to crash into it, even a great accomplishment sage to be, strange beast would definitely suffer a great loss in strength due to the invasion of the black fog. If it was not powerful enough, it might even lose all ability to resist. And that great accomplishment, sage to be, strange beast, was in this black fog. Luo Fan's puppet, which was floating in the void, stretched out its arms and legs, and a vast and boundless aura suddenly erupted from its body. It covered the entire sky and pressed down on the entire swamp. As a great accomplishment, sage to be, even if it was just a puppet, its aura was also unbelievably powerful. It was only natural for it to materialize. In an instant, a bright red curtain of the sky pressed down on the swamp from above. Under the pressure of the bright red sky curtain, the black fog sank directly into the swamp below. Even the swamp itself was constantly pressed down during this process. A roar that sounded like a dragon and a tiger suddenly rang out from the depths of the swamp. Then, a violent aura blasted up from the depths of the swamp, causing the aura that the puppet had released to turn into a bright red sky curtain to suddenly stagnate. Then, it even surged up at an even faster speed. When the two collided, the void let out cracking sounds, as if it could not withstand the impact and was about to collapse. If this had happened in Luo Fan's previous location, in a dream world that was like the starry sky of the universe, at this moment, the void would definitely have collapsed and the world would have shattered. The void within a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers would have turned into paste. However, this was clearly not the universe of the lower realm, but the holy region. This was a strange world that could greatly suppress Luo Fan, who was at the end of the Tao integration realm, so he could only use various methods to get rid of this oppression. The stability of the void and the stability of time in this world was much stronger than that of the great heaven and earth that Luo Fan had experienced. Although the impact of this aura, which could twist the void within a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers into paste, made the void crackle. In fact, it did not even cause the slightest crack in the void. The void was still unimaginably stable, and there were still no signs of destruction. The mysteriousness of the holy region was evident from this. Luo Fan saw this change, but he secretly shook his head in his heart. Although the stability of space and time in the holy region had reached an unimaginable level, going too far was as bad as not going far enough. However, he was placing too much emphasis on the degree of stability and stability of these two things. Although he could not find out what was wrong with this change, he felt quite uncomfortable. It was as if something was missing or there was something unbalanced. In comparison, he felt that the stability of space and time in the Tianyuan great heaven and earth was more mysterious and suitable. Even the fragile space and time in the real earth universe were more suitable than the space and time in the holy region. This thought only flashed across Luo Fan's mind. In a flash, Luo Fan had already refocused his attention on the battle in front of him. The puppet raised its hand and turned, and its aura suddenly retracted. In an instant, it was done. The pitch-black aura that rushed up from below was like a baseball. It was slapped into the void, and a long crack visible to the naked eye was blasted into the void millions of kilometers above, which did not disappear for a long time. This was one of the weaknesses of the strange beast. Because of its lack of intelligence, it could not perfectly control its own power and aura. Therefore, it could naturally be directly led away through some small tricks. After leading the aura away, Luo Fan's puppet took a step and directly followed the traces of the aura into the swamp below. It went straight to the depths of the swamp and saw the incomparably huge, strange beast. This was a strange beast that looked like a crocodile. However, this crocodile was tens of thousands of times bigger than a normal crocodile. It was entrenched in the depths of the swamp below, almost covering half of the swamp. Each of its teeth was like a hill, shining with a sharp cold light. Seeing Luo Fan coming, The crocodile's eyes flashed with a violent blood-red light. His eyes flashed with a violent blood-red light, and he roared like a dragon and a tiger. He opened his mouth, and as if he had transcended time and space, he had already sucked Luo Fan into his mouth and fiercely bit down. This bite, it made the time and space in its mouth seem to become solid and began to crazily squeeze everything wrapped in it. In an instant, through the puppet, Luo Fan felt as if he was being madly crushed by countless huge millstones. Every cell in his body, every bit of power, every bit of perception, everything seemed to be collapsing, shattering, and dying. This kind of feeling was really unbearable. It actually reacted so quickly. Luo Fan was taken aback. He was surprised that the strange beast could actually react so quickly. Originally, when the aura missed, any living creature should have a moment of delay. This was also the reason why he took the opportunity to directly come here. However, he did not expect the living creatures in the sanctuary to be so different. The aura that missed seemed to have no effect on it at all. It actually reacted the moment he appeared and used the most instinctive attack to engulf him. However, even if that was the case, Luo Fan did not show any signs of worry or fear. With a thought, the puppet's body shook and scattered. Like powder, it was directly pounced on by the pressure and disappeared without a trace. When it reappeared, all the powder had condensed again at the crocodile's forehead. This time, his movements were faster than before. Without any hesitation or pause, he raised his hand and slapped it directly at the crocodile's forehead. In an instant, an unparalleled power suddenly poured into the crocodile's forehead, and through it, it frantically attacked the crocodile's weak intelligence. The crocodile's body was very strong, but its intelligence was much lower than that of ordinary cultivators. It could not withstand such an impact in an instant. The light in its eyes dissipated, and its entire body trembled violently. It let out a terrifying and shrill roar, as if it had suffered an unimaginable impact. At this moment, a bright red river suddenly appeared above the puppet's head. Then, with a turn, it directly poured into the crocodile's forehead. Next, the huge crocodile, which was tens of thousands of kilometers wide, disappeared without a trace, leaving only a huge hole in the depths of the swamp. The crocodile was directly swallowed into the strange universe created by the River of Time. I finally succeeded. I almost failed at the last moment. Luo Fan let out a long sigh, and a look of relief appeared on his face. Fortunately, the crocodile's intelligence was not very strong. If it was as strong as an ordinary cultivator, it would still be awake when Yi Shiwen poured the River of Time into it, and it would only need a slight struggle to break free. Because its strength was greatly suppressed, the power of the River of Time could not be fully unleashed, and it would not be able to easily swallow a greater perfection quasi-sage cultivator like it did during the battle. With that thought in mind, he had already left the small world inside the puppet's body and appeared outside the puppet's body. The River of Time had also returned to his head. About 10 more days. After slightly measuring the time that the huge crocodile could last, Luo Fan had already made a judgment. He curled up his legs and sat cross-legged in the air within the puppet's protective circle. He closed his eyes, and his mind entered the universe inside the River of Time. He began to control all the changes in the universe inside the River of Time and launched a frenzied attack on the huge crocodile that had been swallowed. The crocodile was extremely powerful, and the power that it could exert in the void of the universe was even more terrifying. With a raise of its hand or foot, the void would shatter, and the stars would shatter. Its greater perfection quasi-sage divine sense was unleashed without restraint. Looking at its joyful expression, perhaps it had never displayed its strength so vividly and unscrupulously in its entire life. Seeing that it was so happy, Luo Fan was also delighted. In this way, it would no longer be able to escape from his control. 10 days passed in a flash. On this day, Luo Fan's body trembled, and the River of Time trembled as well. Then, the River of Time became increasingly bright red, and its meandering movements became increasingly mysterious. At that moment, Luo Fan felt that the shackles of his cultivation realm had weakened again. Chapter 983. It's indeed effective. Luo Fan revealed a satisfied smile. At this moment, he had killed the huge, great accomplishment Sage-to-be crocodile in the River of Time. The benefits he gained were not only the same as the great accomplishment Sage-to-be cultivators. Moreover, as he was born and raised in the sanctuary, he did not need to comprehend it on his own. As a result, the weakening effect of the sanctuary on him was greatly reduced. As for the boundless laws in the surroundings, he didn't need to comprehend them, and they were naturally understood by him. It was as if the countless profundities were already in his mind, but he just couldn't recall them at the moment. Knowing that this method was effective, Luo Fan could not delay any further. With a slight thought, he took a step forward and crossed the void in an instant, arriving at a place hundreds of millions of miles away. It was an ancient forest. The trees in the forest were all extremely tall and exuded a boundless aura of time. Anyone who saw them would feel as if they had been baptized by time. This was the place where the other great perfection Sage-to-be was located. When Luo Fan's figure appeared above the forest, an incomparably powerful shock wave suddenly rushed towards him from below. The shock wave was extremely mysterious. Although it was just a wave, it was so condensed that it was like a real substance. It even condensed into a world of nothingness along the way. Although these worlds were extremely small, they were extremely detailed, and they contained almost everything that a normal world should have. The speed of the shock wave was extremely fast. It was unimaginable, as if it had transcended time and space. When Luo Fan first sensed its existence, it had already enveloped Luo Fan. As the shock wave rushed towards Luo Fan, it revealed countless mysterious scenes of the world. But in essence, it was a destructive attack. Being enveloped by it, Luo Fan naturally did not feel like he had entered a real world. Instead, the entire world exploded. All the explosive force and shock wave poured towards his body without leaking out. These forces were extremely powerful. At this moment, Luo Fan even felt as if his existence in time and space was about to be completely erased. Fortunately, he was already prepared. In that instant, with a single thought, his puppet took his place, and he directly entered the miniature world within his puppet. Countless powerful shock waves unreservedly struck the puppet's body. In an instant, the entire puppet suddenly collapsed. The 365 universes instantly shot out in all directions. Bright red threads that connected the 365 universes became extremely long, as if they had been expanded hundreds of millions of times. They directly formed a huge net with a circumference of tens of thousands of miles in the void. The shock wave wreaked havoc for a long time before gradually subsiding. When it subsided, there were already signs of distortion in the void. After the impact had completely subsided, there was even the metallic sound of a spring snapping back, causing the dissipated shock wave to condense again and surge back. However, the shock wave was not controlled, so it only spread for a circumference of a few hundred meters. Then it completely dissipated. When everything calmed down, the bright red threads that covered a circumference of tens of thousands of miles suddenly shrank. The 365 universes suddenly condensed together with the shrinkage and directly condensed into a golden armored figure at the original location of Luo Fan. It was Luo Fan's puppet. As a great accomplishment quasi-sage realm puppet, and a puppet condensed from 365 universes, it was naturally impossible for it to be destroyed like an ordinary object. Therefore, it was extremely simple for it to disperse and reassemble itself. Needless to say, the endurance of the 365 universes was strong. Although the shock wave was of the great accomplishment Sage-to-be level, it was not an ordinary great accomplishment Sage-to-be level shock wave. However, for the 365 universes, the shock wave only caused its position to scatter in all directions. It was a delusion to want to destroy it instantly. I didn't expect you to know how to gain the upper hand by making the first move. The golden armored figure smiled and spoke in Luo Fan's voice. Then, he took a step forward and arrived at the center of the forest. Here, there was the largest, oldest, tallest, and most extensive ancient tree in the forest. This was the great accomplishment sage-to-be level living being. It was also the living being that attacked Luo Fan and almost made it impossible for Luo Fan to dodge. The moment the puppet approached, the ancient tree shook slightly and boundless lightning flashed around it. The lightning bolts condensed into thousands of different shapes and forms and shot towards the puppet. They covered the sky and the earth, almost completely drowning the puppet. In the face of such an attack, Luo Fan just smiled slightly. His whole body shook, and a bright red light condensed into countless arms, directly grabbing each of the strange forms condensed from lightning. His body directly crashed into the ancient tree. The ancient tree shook violently. Following that, a bright red river gushed out from the ancient tree. As it gushed out, the entire ancient tree seemed to have been uprooted from the ground and shot into the sky. In the end, it disappeared without a trace after rising several dozen feet from the ground. All that was left was a huge pit and the golden-armored figure floating above the pit. As the ancient tree disappeared, the entire forest shook violently. Boundless vitality began to leak out of the forest. The entire sky and land were enveloped in an increasingly dense vitality, revealing a false prosperity. Under the illumination of this extremely dense vitality, the ancient trees gradually withered and their leaves fluttered. When the vitality reached its limit, the ancient trees also died. The space in front of the puppet shook slightly, and then Luo Fan's figure appeared. The bright red river also landed on his head. On one of the waves of the bright red river, there was an ancient tree waving its branches, and an endless amount of energy poured out from it. Luo Fan looked at the river. With a faint smile, he sat down cross-legged in the void. His consciousness directly merged with the bright red river and began to control everything in the universe, mercilessly killing the ancient tree. This time, it took another 10 days. 10 days later, Luo Fan's entire body shook, and the pressure of the entire sanctuary on him instantly disappeared. He instantly felt that his body was incomparably carefree, and everything in the sanctuary seemed to be no longer a secret to him. He could even be almost omnipotent here. With a slight thought, he raised his hand and poked at the void. A small illusory world appeared out of thin air. The illusory world was vivid and lifelike, and everything that an ordinary genius should have had was there. However, the time and space in the sanctuary were too powerful. Although it was only an illusory world, it was extremely difficult to maintain. Soon, the illusory world was annihilated as if it had never existed. There are still 9,983. Slightly sensing the shackles of the realm that he had encountered, Luo Fan let out a long sigh. In the following period of time, Luo Fan continued to expand his search range. Previously, he had sensed that there were only 3 great accomplishment sage-to-be mutated beasts within a radius of hundreds of millions of miles. However, that was only within the range that he had sensed. Beyond this range, there were even more great accomplishment sage-to-be living beings. As the range of these living beings increased, the number of mutated beasts that he could find increased as well. When the 3 great accomplishment sage-to-be beasts were completely dealt with, there was a 4th, a 5th, a 6th. Among them, there were also some mutated beasts that surpassed the great accomplishment sage-to-be, but they were too powerful. Luo Fan was not completely confident that he could deal with them at the moment. Therefore, whenever he sensed a mutated beast that surpassed the great accomplishment sage-to-be, he would bypass the range and look for other great accomplishment sage-to-be beasts to deal with. Just like that, after 10 years, Luo Fan was already hundreds of millions of miles away from the original location where he had entered the sanctuary. This area was still a barren wasteland. It was still a place without any signs of human habitation. During these 10 years, the number of great accomplishment sage-to-be beasts that he had found had also reached over 1,000. At this moment, he was only left with 8,936 great accomplishment sage-to-be beasts that he needed to break through the shackles of his cultivation base. Although this was still a terrifyingly huge number, it was already less than 1,000 compared to the original number of over 10,000. No matter how one looked at it, this was an extremely shocking achievement. 10 years is equivalent to 1,000. In this case, I should be able to succeed in 100 years. This thought would occasionally flash across Luo Fan's mind. Although he knew that the possibility of completing this breakthrough in 100 years was extremely small, such illusions would still appear in his mind from time to time. This was unavoidable. After all, he was an ordinary living being. Even though he was already at the end of the Tao integration stage, even though his Tao heart and spirit were perfect, it was inevitable that he would have some expectations and illusions. On this day, Luo Fan arrived at a huge lake. According to his senses, there was a great accomplishment sage-to-be beast in the shape of a dragon. He had already dealt with over 1,000 of such beasts, so he was already very experienced. However, he no longer had to wait for the other party to make a move, nor did he have to use the puppets. The river of time above his head plunged directly into the depths of the lake, intending to swallow the dragon into the universe within the river of time. After so many experiences, the changes of his river of time were extremely mysterious. It trembled slightly in the void and flashed through mysterious trajectories. In fact, it even caused space and time to tremble, causing the surrounding space-time to undergo some inexplicable changes. It was as if its existence had distorted and created many dimensions of space-time. As expected, it's here. A deep and choppy voice suddenly rang in Luo Fan's ears. Then, an incomparably powerful force was exerted on his body. In an instant, the void within a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles was completely separated from the outside world, forming an independent small world. And this small world was in the hands of an extremely powerful existence. The void changed, the world distorted, and time changed. In the blink of an eye, Luo Fan had turned from the hunter to the hunted. The powerful force did not stop at this moment. It was still suppressing Luo Fan and restraining his body. His strength, his spirit, his senses, and even his thoughts were all suppressed by this force. Even his river of time lost its effect in the face of this force. It seemed to have become an ordinary bright red river that stopped in the void, unable to change at all. Roar. A dragon roar that contained shock, anger, and irritation was suddenly heard from the depths of the lake. Then, a dragon-shaped beast rushed out of the lake and hovered in the void, glaring at Luo Fan with blood-red eyes. Those blood-red eyes contained boundless brutality, boundless anger, and a kind of unconcealable fear. This dragon-shaped beast wriggled in the void and wanted to pounce on Luo Fan several times to kill him. But it could not muster up the courage to step forward. It's actually a beast at the peak of the sage-to-be realm. I didn't expect it to lose control so soon. Such a thought flashed across Luo Fan's mind at this moment. Although the force was so powerful that it could almost control everything about him, it was, after all, only almost. Although his thoughts had been delayed, they hadn't stopped. Naturally, he could still think. He had long expected that such a day would come. In the past 10 years, he had killed thousands of exotic beasts at the advanced level of the sage-to-be realm. But he also sensed many exotic beasts beyond the advanced level of the sage-to-be realm. In other words, they were at the peak of the sage-to-be realm, which was equivalent to the Tao Master realm. Although he carefully bypassed these exotic beasts, he tried his best not to fight with them. But after all, he was wantonly killing in their territory. If these exotic beasts were too lazy to care about him, he would naturally be fine. But if any of them were a little more diligent, he would probably be attacked by the exotic beast at the peak of the sage-to-be realm. The reason why he was not attacked in the past 10 years was that he was lucky. The exotic beasts at the peak of the sage-to-be realm were very lazy. Exotic beasts at the peak of the sage-to-be realm really have spiritual intelligence no less than that of ordinary people. Suddenly, such a thought appeared in Luo Fan's mind. Although the exotic beast's words were not fluent, it could, after all, understand the human language. This was something that the thousands of exotic beasts at the advanced level of the Sage-to-Be realm he had seen before did not have. At this moment, a figure materialized and appeared on the head of the dragon-shaped creature. This figure was in the shape of a white tiger with wings and a big word king above its head. Although it was not small, it was only the size of an ordinary creature. Compared with the dragon-shaped exotic beast, it looked like an elephant and an ant. However, that was only in terms of appearance. The difference between their auras was completely opposite, or perhaps even greater. The aura emitted by the little long-winged white tiger was simply overwhelming. In comparison, the aura of the advanced level of the Sage-to-Be realm of the dragon-shaped exotic beast was as weak as a building. It was simply insignificant. Since the appearance of the long-winged white tiger, the dragon-shaped exotic beast seemed to have met its natural enemy. It became dispirited and cautious, not daring to be impudent. The divine light in its eyes was also restrained to the extreme, making it look like a docile kitten. The long-winged white tiger landed on the head of the dragon-shaped exotic beast and looked at Luo Fan with a tyrannical divine light. The divine light contained a kind of light of wisdom that Luo Fan had never seen from other exotic beasts. Although it was not much, it was enough to make people not treat it as a beast. "This is my territory. You have offended me. You deserve to die." The long-winged white tiger spat out these words in a jerky manner. While speaking, Luo Fan felt the power restricting him relax slightly. His original state of being unable to speak had disappeared. Although he still couldn't move, he could already speak. At this moment, he did not feel much panic in his heart. Although the exotic beast was powerful, it was still exotic beast. Even if it was at the peak of the Sage-to-Be realm, which was equivalent to a Tao master and had slightly improved spiritual wisdom, it could not be compared to a real Tao master. However, there were still many flaws in the way he used his power. If he wanted to, he could just abandon his puppet and escape. More importantly, the dreamer was just the advanced level of the Sage-to-Be. He was not even a Tao master. How could the exotic beast at the peak of the Sage-to-Be realm, in his dream, really have the characteristics of a peak of the Sage-to-Be? Although the exotic beast was powerful, it only strengthened its strengthened body by countless times. In essence, it was no different from a peak of the Sage-to-Be realm. Its various means were not beyond the scope of Luo Fan's understanding. With such confidence, there was naturally no need for him to panic. Without panicking, Luo Fan even showed a faint smile on his face. He said, "I want to challenge you. I want this territory." Hearing Luo Fan's words, the long-winged white tiger could not help but widen its eyes and accumulate anger in its eyes. Then, a wild roar resounded from his mouth. "Good. I accept your challenge." While speaking, Luo Fan felt that the power suppression on his body had completely disappeared in an instant. An indescribable sense of relaxation appeared again. Whether it was his body, strength, divine soul, will, perception, or even the river of time below, he had completely regained control in an instant. Isn't he a little too straightforward? He actually gave up all his advantages to have a fair fight with me. It seems that although it has some spiritual wisdom, it still can't get rid of its animal nature. When Luo Fan felt this kind of relaxation, he couldn't help but reveal an expression that didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Such a thought flashed through his mind. Of course, even though that was what he was thinking, he didn't hesitate in the slightest. The river of time below slowly withdrew, and when it arrived next to the dragon-shaped exotic beast, it quickly spun around. Before the long-winged white tiger could react, the dragon-shaped exotic beast and the long-winged white tiger had been drawn into the internal universe of the River of Time. Chapter 984. As the long-winged white tiger and the dragon-shaped exotic beast were swallowed into the inner universe of the River of Time, the space that had been separated instantly returned to normal. Everything that had happened before was like a dream. Although the long-winged white tiger was much more intelligent than other exotic beasts, it was still a beast after all. When it heard that Luo Fan wanted to challenge it, it naturally thought that Luo Fan was doing this for its territory. As a beast, it naturally had to defeat its opponent in his strongest state to be considered a complete victory. Therefore, when it heard Luo Fan's challenge, it relaxed its strength, relaxed Luo Fan, who had been restrained, and let Luo Fan withdraw his divine sense, so that Luo Fan could recover to his peak state to fight with it. Obviously, it regarded Luo Fan as one of its kind. It thought that Luo Fan should have the same idea and also wanted to fight with it in an absolutely fair way. That was why the current situation happened. In the process of withdrawing the River of Time, Luo Fan easily bypassed the exotic beast at the peak of the Sage-to-Be realm and directly brought it into the inner universe of the River of Time. Although the long-winged white tiger was an exotic beast at the peak of the Sage-to-Be realm, it was a supreme existence equivalent to the Tao Master Realm. However, as mentioned above, the existence that created this dream world was only at the profound Sage-to-Be realm, and its understanding of the peak of the Sage-to-Be realm was very shallow. Although the exotic beast at the peak of the Sage-to-Be realm was many times more powerful than a great Sage-to-Be, and its body was also much stronger than a profound Sage-to-Be, it was still at the profound Sage-to-Be realm in essence. Because of this, even if the long-winged white tiger was at the peak of the Sage-to-Be realm, there was not much difference between it and the exotic beasts at the profound Sage-to-Be realm who entered the inner universe of the River of Time. At most, the time that it could support would be different. Luo Fan sat in the air above the lake. His puppet appeared by his side to protect him. The River of Time lay above his head, and it surged endlessly as if it was a mysterious river that had existed since time immemorial and would continue to exist for countless years to come. In the inner universe, the long-winged white tiger crazily unleashed its power. At this moment, it was filled with endless anger. The anger even condensed around its body, turning into a sea of blood that constantly eroded everything around it. Time, space, matter, energy, everything in the inner universe was like a piece of paper meeting fire when it encountered the sea of blood. It was directly burned and melted, disappearing without a trace. There were also countless strange creatures around him. Among them, there were even many powerful great perfection Sage-to-Be. Apart from the various miraculous creatures that Luo Fan had encountered in the thousands of checkpoints, there were also those great perfection Sage-to-Be that he had killed in the qualification battle of the Sanctuary, as well as the more than 1,000 great perfection Sage-to-Be level strange beasts in the Sanctuary. Because these profound Sage-to-Be realm experts had died in this universe, they were not completely absorbed by the universe. However, they were imitated by the universe and did not need to be restricted by Luo Fan's strength. In other words, they were completely able to exert the power of profound Sage-to-Be realm experts. Moreover, because of the mysteries of this universe, they were immortal. Even if they were killed, they could be reborn at any time. Moreover, the whole process did not even need to consume any of Luo Fan's strength. After all, this universe was completely separated from the outside world. Even if those profound Sage-to-Be realm experts were killed, their power would only be scattered in this universe. Naturally, they could be condensed again without any loss, and there was no need to consume any of Luo Fan's power. Surrounded by so many powerful creatures, the long-winged white tiger, who was at the pinnacle of the Sage-to-Be realm, did not panic at all. The sea of blood around it, which was formed by its anger, became even redder and larger, and its expression became even more ferocious. It roared in the cosmos, and every move it made would erupt with shocking power. In front of it, profound Sage-to-Be realm experts were like ordinary ants. It could kill several of them with a single move, and every single one of them would be destroyed and turned into irretrievable powder. The countless creatures of the same realm as Luo Fan were even more fragile in front of it. With a single move, a large number of them would perish, and an entire direction would be emptied. Although the long-winged white tiger was only the size of an ordinary tiger, the brilliance of power it emitted filled the entire universe for an unknown number of light years. Every movement it made people wonder if the universe would collapse and perish in an instant. Fortunately, this universe was within the river of time and contained a trace of the mysteries of the tide of time. Even though it was on the verge of collapse, and even though it was like a piece of paper in front of the long-winged white tiger, it still stood firm in the countless attacks and did not really collapse and perish because of its actions. As for those creatures, they died and came back to life. No matter how many of them were killed, they would be reborn in an instant. No matter how hard the strange beast fought, it could not escape the encirclement of the countless creatures, let alone rush out of this universe. When Luo Fan's mind entered the universe, he saw such a scene. Faced with this scene, Luo Fan could not help but be overjoyed. At the same time, he felt extremely lucky. Fortunately, he had used some means to swallow the long-winged white tiger into this universe. Otherwise, even if he had all kinds of means to fight with it in the outside world, he would definitely be in a difficult situation. In the end, he would even have to pay a huge price to defeat it. Even if he could not defeat it, he could only escape like a stray dog. However, the situation was naturally different in this universe. As long as it could not escape from this universe, the result was doomed. It would definitely die in this universe. Not only would it bring great benefits to him in breaking the shackles of his realm, but it would also give him the possibility of condensing a peak sage-to-be in this universe. Just like the 1,000-odd beasts at the great accomplishment sage-to-be level that he had condensed at this moment, if those pinnacle sage-to-be died in this universe, he would naturally be able to condense those beasts at the great accomplishment sage-to-be level when he fought with his enemies in the future. At that time, he would no longer need to rely on countless living beings to fight against exotic beasts at the pinnacle of the sage-to-be level. He would only need to spend an extremely short amount of time to deal with the exotic beasts at the pinnacle of the sage-to-be level. I only hope that the exotic beasts at the Dao Master realm can be as straightforward as this one. If so, perhaps I can go to those exotic beasts that I have previously given up. Such a thought flashed through Meng Ruina's mind in Luo Fan's mind. However, it was just a flash. At this moment, the most important thing was to get rid of the long-winged white tiger in front of him. As for finding the exotic beast that he had previously given up, he did not know when he would be able to find the time. The countless exotic beasts in the universe were originally quite orderly, but after all, they were just instinctively controlled by the universe. Even if they were orderly, they were not as good as real cultivators. As soon as Luo Fan took over the control, the situation immediately changed. The exotic beast at the advanced sage-to-be realm and the dozen or so sage-to-be realm experts directly formed a huge formation, condensing the power of the entire universe into one point and wrapping around the long-winged white tiger. In an instant, the void around the long-winged white tiger seemed to have overlapped tens of thousands of times, showing a special quality similar to that of the sanctuary realm. It was so stable that it broke the balance. Then, the sea of blood formed by the exotic beast's anger was compressed by a strong force and kept retreating. In the end, it shrank back to the body of the exotic beast, leaving only a thin layer that barely wrapped around the body of the exotic beast. As for the more than 1,000 exotic beasts and the dozen or so sage-to-be realm experts, they had already integrated into the void and turned into a huge, complicated, and mysterious formation, firmly wrapping the void around the exotic beast for millions of light years. When all these things were done, the endless creatures that were as strong as Luo Fan that had been condensed from the universe started to appear in the formation diagram. They kept fusing with it, causing the formation diagram to become more and more realistic and its power to become more and more powerful. In the end, the sea of blood was pressed back into the body of the exotic beast, and the long-winged white tiger returned to its original appearance, looking like an ordinary white tiger. The white tiger roared continuously, its anger shocking the heavens. Its body struggled constantly, its limbs and wings flapping nonstop. Although the formation had condensed the power of the entire universe, it still trembled and swayed under its movements, as if it could collapse and disappear at any time. The white tiger's roar naturally caused the universe to respond, producing countless sound waves. Creatures covered the sky and covered the earth as they rushed to various parts of the formation, fighting fiercely with all the creatures on the formation. As for the exotic beast itself, it charged straight towards the main body of the formation, wanting to directly destroy it. Naturally, Luo Fan did not hold back. He activated the formation, and beams of mysterious light shot towards the exotic beast like sharp blades, constantly cutting its aura and attacking its body. The strange beast's body was extremely tough. Even though the sharp blades were able to pierce through space and sever time, they were only able to leave behind white spots on its body, and it wasn't even able to break its skin. This clearly showed how terrifying and powerful the strange beast was. Luo Fan controlled the countless creatures in the universe to fight the exotic beast. The dragon-shaped exotic beast that he and the exotic beast had taken into the universe at the same time had long since become one of his forces. The moment the exotic beast stepped into the universe, it was torn to pieces by the long-winged white tiger's power and turned into nothingness. Although the long-winged white tiger had appeared just before Luo Fan was about to destroy the exotic beast, it could be said that it had saved the exotic beast. However, its original intention was obviously not to treat that exotic beast well or help it in any way. It was just a coincidence that Luo Fan had chosen it. As such, he naturally wouldn't take the dragon-shaped exotic beast seriously. After entering the cosmos, he naturally couldn't restrain his power just because of the dragon-shaped exotic beast's existence. Although the dragon-shaped mutated beast was at the great accomplishment Sage-to-Be realm, it was just an existence that could be destroyed by a wave of power for a mutated beast at the peak of the Sage-to-Be realm. Therefore, it was reasonable for it to be smashed into pieces, because it was also equivalent to dying in the universe. Not only did it bring many benefits to Luo Fan in breaking through, but it also allowed the universe inside the universe to condense another great accomplishment Quasi-Sage realm beast. Under the attack of the exotic beast, the formation that Luo Fan had condensed the power of the entire universe and the power of countless exotic beasts and living creatures to form was naturally damaged. The countless living creatures that were guarding the formation were also constantly being consumed. However, in this universe, living creatures could be destroyed as well. When one died, another would naturally be replenished. The number of living creatures would never decrease. In comparison, the exotic beasts were unable to absorb energy from the outside world. Every bit of energy they expended was a bit less. They couldn't grow at all. Under such circumstances, even if the amount of energy they expended with each attack was minimal, there would come a day when they would be completely exhausted. It could be said that the future was doomed to be bleak. Luo Fan sat cross-legged in the air and was guarded by the great accomplishment Quasi-Sage realm puppet. His consciousness was controlling the situation in the universe inside the river of time above his head and killing the exotic beast at the peak Quasi-Sage realm. Just like that, time passed slowly. After a few years, there was a strange vibration in the void of the sacred region. Then, the sky was filled with multicolored light. A strange fragrance that made people feel refreshed filled the void and enveloped the entire sacred region. Then, an inexplicable feeling swept past where Luo Fan was. This feeling told him that the area he was in already had an owner. Moreover, the owner was a sect called the Hidden Armor Sect. It wasn't just the place where he stood. The surrounding area of tens of trillions of miles was also the territory of the Hidden Armor Sect. Moreover, that feeling told him that any living being at the great perfection of the Sage-to-Be realm could not come into conflict with that sect within 100,000 years. One could escape, hide, pledge allegiance, but they could not deal with that sect or hurt anyone in that sect. Otherwise, you would be doomed and never be able to reincarnate. So, the door to the sanctuary has been completely opened. I didn't expect that they would use such a method to divide the territory. Luo Fan could not help but open his eyes, which he had not opened for many years, and an inexplicable smile appeared on his face. The territory of the Hidden Armor Sect was truly shocking. Everything within a radius of tens of trillions of miles belonged to the Hidden Armor Sect, Just how many resources and how much profit did they have to gain from this? With Yang Duo's resources and such great benefits, in 100,000 years, the inner hidden armor sect strength would rise several times over. If they were to directly attach themselves to the sanctuary and completely integrate into it, they would be able to produce at least 4 or 5 great accomplishment quasi-sages in 100,000 years. If they were originally great accomplishment quasi-sages, they might even be able to break through their limits and become peak great accomplishment quasi-sages. Clearly, this was the true significance of this territory. 100,000 years is the time when new sects step into the sanctuary, and it is also the time when old sects accept challenges. In that case, every 100,000 years should be the time when the world changes. No wonder those years were so peaceful. Luo Fan's thoughts turned, and then he thought. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but grow excited. I still have the title of Hidden Armor Sect's Guest Elder. This way, the various plans from before should be changed. Although several years had passed, the river of time above his head was still there. The battle in the universe within the river of time was still at its climax. Although the strange beast seemed to be weaker than it was a few years ago, it was still unimaginably powerful. At this rate, it would take at least hundreds or even thousands of times longer than a few years to solve the problem. This was also one of the reasons why Luo Fan directly bypassed the exotic beast at the peak of the Sage-to-Be realm. Given his current realm, even if the exotic beast at the peak of the Sage-to-Be realm was only simulated and not the real peak of the Sage-to-Be realm, even if he had the help of the River of Time, it would still take a very long time and a lot of energy to solve it. And the final harvest was very likely to be no different from that of the great accomplishment quasi-sage strange beast. The price-to-performance ratio was obviously quite small. Naturally, it was better to deal with the strange beast of the great accomplishment quasi-sage level. At this moment, since the situation had changed, Luo Fan naturally did not have the mood to continue wasting time. With a thought, a crack suddenly appeared in the universe. The crack was so small and obscure that the strange beast of the great accomplishment quasi-sage level could not detect its existence during the battle. However, it was precisely this tiny crack that connected the universe and the sanctuary together. In other words, at this moment, the universe inside the River of Time had become a part of the sacred region. The rules and dharma of the sacred region, which had just appeared in the sacred region, had already been established in the universe. At the same time, the long-winged white tiger in the universe had an inexplicable feeling. This feeling was the same as the one that Luo Fan had felt before. He also felt that this world seemed to have an owner, and that the owner was a sect called the Hidden Armor Sect. At the same time, he also felt that he was under some kind of strong restriction, which prevented him from attacking anyone from the Hidden Armor Sect. Just as he was about to continue thinking, he suddenly sensed a strange aura. A figure that he was extremely familiar with suddenly floated in front of him in a silly manner. That was the despicable person who had tricked him into this strange world. In an instant, hatred and anger overshadowed what little reason he had. He roared and raised his claws. The figure was directly turned into blood and minced meat and scattered in all directions. He was directly clawed into powder by his claws. Something seems wrong. Even though he was not intelligent enough, he could vaguely feel that something was wrong. Right at this moment, a boundless, everlasting, and indestructible aura enveloped him out of thin air. Then that aura trembled, and his entire body directly collapsed. His intelligence turned into nothingness, and his soul directly dispersed, never to be reincarnated again.